With one final crushing blow, the white-armored giant smashes straight through its opponent's defense. Then the whole fight erupts in a flash of light, sealing Player One's win. Sword. That win locks in the Season 6 World Championship title in singles, and right as the crowd erupts, an announcer roars that the glory belongs to the pilot of that giant beast, the Knight of Giant. In this physical world, the pilot yanks his headset off, a bead of sweat sliding down his brow, then rockets his fist into the air with a triumphant yell as the announcer declares the champion's name. Sorry. Sammy just crushed the Knight of Giant, KOG, the worldwide VR craze, where players command gigantic robotic fighters, all racing to claim ultimate supremacy. The commentators on the official live broadcast dissected the final battle, one practically stunned by the sheer ferocity, admitting the whole thing hit so fast it was impossible to keep up. And out of all that noise, Sword sat alone, letting the weight of his wins crash into him, because yeah, he just took the world championship. The online crowd is freaking out, messages explode across the screen, equal parts hype and shock, as they wrestle with how he dodged the impossible and then watch him beat last year's champion, all while the whole tournament played out online. Elsewhere, a light-haired man leans in as the post-match interview kicks off, thinking how he usually tunes in for the champion's words, not the fight itself, and admitting that this time, as the creator of the game, one of the player's moves genuinely blew him away. He leans in toward his monitor as the announcer grills the new champion about how it feels. Then Sword, rattled by all that attention, can only stammer, and the creator clocks it instantly and fires off a question to the shocked winner. When someone off-screen asks about his weird tactics, the new champ's face twists with pure desperation. He locks his eyes on the monitor, mind sprinting through his own thoughts, screaming for a way to save both Kaguya and Riene. That intense, game-focused plea hits so hard the announcer freezes mid-sentence, and all she can squeeze out is a shaky little sound, while the live chat barrels past, stuffed with viewers either baffled or cracking up at the champion's totally unhinged move. She flicks a quick thought, what do I even say? But then she catches the crowd leaning in, so she pushes him to spill more, insisting that even a tiny hint would do, and just as it starts to heat up, she snaps her attention forward, sees the clocks run out, and announces the interview is over, because the team match is next. Just as she's trying to wrap up, he blurts, "Wait." In a desperate last-ditch scramble to explain himself too late, the announcer steps in, formally thanks player Sword, and shuts the interview down. The call drops out and he's left alone in his room. He slumps in his chair, yanks off the VR headset with a defeated sigh, then paces the question through his head, admitting to himself that his desperation all comes down to these girls. His eyes snap across the room to the reason he can't stop loving this, two giant life-size standees of the game's heroines, and he straight up says they're the saviors of his life, not just some characters from a game. That gut-deep belief sparks a fresh resolve in him. His eyes harden as he stares at his folded tracksuit, and right there, he swears to himself he won't quit. His mind snaps back to one brutal memory, the root of all his past despair, when he was in middle school and his parents divorced after each found someone new, a heartbreak that crushed him and reshaped his whole life. He flashes back to his middle school days when he tried to slam a stop to his parents' fights, only to learn, no matter how hard he begged, they weren't going to change. But when it was finally time for them to split, his mom and dad both refused to take him, so they left him stranded, completely alone. He only got one thing, child support payments, trickling into a tiny, bare room he had to pretend was his whole world. Then the memory snaps forward to right after he landed in high school, and he grimly admits that his justice might have been nothing but a foolish impulse, because the moment he saw a classmate getting bullied, he couldn't stand by. Before he even realized what happened, his help backfired. Boom, he became the next target, and his desk was blasted with vicious insults like garbage, idiot, and Mr. Justice. He ended up dead alone with nobody to lean on. Teachers couldn't stop the bullies, and every other student kept their distance like fear was contagious. So he just dragged his days by, counting the minutes, praying they'd get bored of tormenting him. But his calm endurance didn't buy him peace for even a second. Those bullies, enraged by his attitude, stormed right up and squared off with makeshift weapons. The fight ended with him battered and tossed aside, left to rot in a desolate, rain-soaked alley. He still felt that brutal physical pain from the bullying, but the real horror wasn't even skin-deep. It was the way another wound went far deeper inside. That crushing loneliness shattered him. Locked in his empty room, he replayed his father's last message, a cold order to never contact him again, and the silence swallowed him whole. Staring into the void, he reached a cold, brutal truth. Here, there was nothing left worth living for. Right as despair swallowed him whole, a razor-sharp voice snapped through the air. "Kenya, wake up already." He drowned in his dark thoughts, convinced that this world wouldn't care enough to even glance his way. That voice kept pounding louder, more and more desperate. "Kenya-kun, get up. how long are you going to stay asleep? We still haven't settled our fight. A single tear slid down his cheek as the thought slammed through him. This world had finally taken everything, and there was no one left who would ever shout his name again. Right when he hit rock bottom, that's when fate collided with them. He'd finally found his purpose in two heroines from another world, Reina Sylphide, all calm and unreadable on the surface as she stared straight into him, and Akagami Kaguya, who acted icy cold but was secretly kind to the bone. A burning feeling of love filled his chest for both of them. His devotion turned into an obsession, because the robot battle game that used to be his only hobby finally dropped a story mode, and he got so hooked that he ditched school and lived just to chase these girls. In that virtual world, he swore that calling his name and locking eyes with him was what truly saved him. But the whole tale crushed hearts with one brutal, unavoidable tragedy, 3 different paths, same end. In one, the heroines are gone, and Kaguya drags out a final apology to Kenya for being so impossible before she spills her love with her last breath. In the other, Riene begs him to stay alive, choking on her own fear until it hits her. Wait, I've been smiling at love the whole time, right before everything slips away. He screamed in pure agony, caught in the game's brutal trap. Pick Reina and Kaguya dies, pick Kaguya and Reina dies, and somehow, the rules demanded that someone pay with their life. He tore through every possible route and pattern, begging for a different answer, yet every single path led to the exact same dead end. The girl he picked would live, while the one he tossed aside would die, and all he wanted was one simple miracle, to survive and live together with the two of them. He slumped in his room, a sudden spark of hope flashing in his head, but when he looked at his notes, that dream withered fast, until all that was left was full-on resignation. His mind was sprinting, replaying how the game's creator had stayed completely mum about any chance the heroines could survive. Then one old memory slammed back, an early battle scene meant to be lost. This moment gets sold as the turning point, a ruthless trap where one lone unit gets thrown against 100 mass-produced machines. Lying on his bed, he doom-scrolled old forum threads about that same mission. Players had argued for years, chasing theories of a secret branching point, but every time the dust settled, the verdict stayed brutal. No matter how you sliced it, it was a guaranteed losing event. He snapped his gaze to the VR headset, and the odds slammed back into his head. 1 basic rig, 0 repair kits, and 100 enemies bearing down. This fight wasn't winnable, plain and brutal. Victory felt impossible from the start. But there he lay in the dead quiet of his room, and a stubborn thought finally sparked in his chest, quietly defying the impossible. A chilling vision flashes. Reina Sulphide and Akagami Kaguya get battered and bleeding, yet they're still grinning, radiating this deep, unshakable peace. A trembling hand shoots out, bracing for the haunting what if, clinging to the slim hope that something, anything, could still be possible. The question hangs there like a blade. Can they find a way past this clash, a route back to laughing together again? And right in front of them, a crushing wall of armored soldiers looms, proving this fight won't be easy. Cancer becomes nothing but a memory, the kind you hold close, with shared laughter drifting under a clear sky, while Kenya sits between them, his heart blazing with one unshakable resolve, determined to save them. He yanks on his VR headset, and that peaceful memory burns into him, driving his determination the moment he faces what's next. He knows he'll never know if he can pull it off until he goes for it, so there's no more waiting, he just has to try. With his butt planted in the cockpit and the controls humming under his hands, he calls out to the memory of his friends, Kaguya, Reina, then flashes a confident grin. This time it's my turn to save you. With that vow he erupts with power. One after another, the enemy's match goes down, shattering under his unrelenting fury until all that's left is a massive explosion. He screamed in pure frustration, ripping his head away from everything. This game was impossible, a fight he knew he'd never win. Then he collapsed on his bedroom floor like a defeated hero, while his parents hovered outside the door, worried sick and helpless to reach him. Cowering under his covers, he tried to disappear from the world, until his eyes locked onto that VR headset and a brutal truth hit him. This was the only way forward, because if he quit now, nothing would ever change from the past. With that fresh purpose blazing, he slapped on a headset and grinned like he meant it, telling everyone not to underestimate a loner gamer, because he had all the time in the world and enough grit to make it count. He threw himself into a brutal training grind because he knew one thing for sure: if he wanted to beat that event, he'd need killer piloting. So he trained his focus with blindfold drills, learning to read every move without sight, then tore through the enemy's algorithms and scribbled strategy after strategy until his notebooks were packed, because saving Riene and Kaguya was on the line. 2 more months slammed by in a blur of sleepless nights and brutal practice, with nothing to show for it except a growing mountain of empty energy drinks. After all that grind, it finally paid off. Back in the virtual battlefield, His mech crushed the aftermath and stood tall over wreckage, with 90 machines already destroyed and only 10 left, and he could feel it. The real fight was only just starting. He struck the final wave fast, clocking how their patterns had slipped out of reach, nowhere near predictable anymore, and with every new clash he and they adjusted on the fly from that moment on, because he knew one thing for sure. Victory would come down to improvisation alone. With zero hesitation, his blade erupted in flashes, mowing through one enemy after another as the counter slid past 91 and then 92. Then, for one heartbeat, doubt tried to sneak in. Could he actually pull this off? He slammed that thought into the ground instantly. He had to win. In the middle of the fighting chaos, Akagami Kaguya's memory hit him like lightning. She scolded him hard for being too cold and pushed him to finally show more love. He turned that memory into fuel and drove his assault with brutal focus, hacking through machine after machine until the 94th, 95th, and 96th targets were cut down fast, his blade and cannon doing the killing. The last remaining machines struck back with brutal force. One of them fired a massive cannon blast that swallowed an entire city block in a roaring wall of fire. As he dodged the blast, a new voice crashed into his mind, Raina Sylphide. She confessed she adored his deadpan, cool vibe, then admitted the real itch in her heart. She wanted to be there when he finally cracked a laugh and showed her what that face looks like. Her words slammed into him like a command. He ripped through the 97th, 98th, and 99th opponents, his resolve blazing hotter with every hit, and he knew it. If there was even one way to save both of them, he was going to tear that answer out of the dark, no matter what he desperately wanted to. With a roar that meant business, he vowed he'd reach that future, then poured every ounce of his will into one final, decisive slash. His blade bit down and landed, obliterating the very last machine, the 100th. Back in his room, Kenya crumpled into his chair, sweat pouring down his face as he locked eyes with the screen, and then it hit him. That tiny, victorious smile flickered on his lips. He'd done it, he'd cleared the whole thing. And for the first time, he believed it. If he really tried, he could succeed. Just as his triumph hit peak, an unexpected message slammed onto the screen. Congratulations on a fantastic victory. He froze, staring in total confusion, with one burning thought: what on earth did it mean? He locked eyes with the digital void, wondering if this victory was just the calm before the next wave of deadly challenges. A fresh prompt flickered into existence in front of him, and it hit him with one brutal question: do you still have the will to change the world? He pictured the heroines who'd lit his heart on fire, and his resolve turned into steel. No matter how many tries it took, he'd do it for them. With a fearless grin, he reached out and picked yes asterisk asterisk. The second his choice locked in, a black storm of a portal yanked him straight down, and as he got dragged through that glitchy digital void, one last message cut across his vision: good luck. It got violently ripped back into reality and slammed onto the floor of his room with a deafening thud. Rubbing his aching head, he groaned and muttered that the game was getting way too real, because it honestly felt like he'd fallen out of it. His confusion spiked the moment he grabbed for his headset, and it wasn't there. He couldn't figure out when it slipped off, then his stomach dropped when he scanned the room and saw the real nightmare. His expensive controllers were gone too. Racing to find his missing gear, he spotted an unfamiliar envelope on the floor and snatched it up, eyes narrowing like, what is this? Inside was an approval letter addressed to Miss Yuruji Kenya asterisk, granting him a spot at Asgard Knight Academy asterisk, and he could swear he'd never even heard of the place before. While he stared at the letter in confusion, it suddenly started whining with a weird, high-pitched whir, louder and louder until his father finally shoved the door open and snapped, complaining about the racket. He snapped his gaze to the sky, stunned as the thunderous roar of two armored machines cut through the air while they streaked past overhead. His eyes snapped wide with disbelief the moment he spotted the flying machines, Cog Eeks, and for a second he couldn't trust his own senses, like he might have passed out mid-breath. This couldn't be real. The mechs kept soaring through the air, banking hard as they looped around those two giant skyscrapers that ruled the city skyline. Etched across the heart of the main structure was a massive crest, a shield stamped with the mark of a brutal winged beast. Elsewhere behind the walls of that institution, a hallway stretched on wall-to-wall with photos that screamed teamwork, pride, and hard-earned victories. For Akagami Kaguya, this was the world she'd been chasing with everything she had, the dream she fought for every step of the way. Or Raina Sylphide, this was the world she used to fantasize about, and now it sat within her reach, real at last. And for one more young man, it felt like the world he'd always worshipped, one future he swore would stay forever out of reach, yet there he was, marching toward the grand entrance with his crew. Elsewhere, Kenya stands at the bathroom sink, splashes cold water on his face and freezes, because the dream he's worshipped for years might finally be real. He could actually step into that world. He drops his hands and locks onto his reflection, eyes blown wide, pure disbelief and total confusion. That whole fantasy just crumbled into harsh reality, and now one terrifying question pins him in place. What is he even supposed to do here? A lone figure stands there in the same Knight Academy uniform everyone recognizes, the kind you've seen a million times in that game world. The platform drops and Kenya snaps to attention. Jolted by a sudden buzz from his phone, he gapes at the screen, trying to convince himself it's just some in-game item until the truth hits and he practically jumps out of his skin. While he didn't have time to deal with that weird device yet, he snatched on his brand new uniform and raced to the screen. His worst fears were right there, the 9 AM entrance ceremony. It was already 8:16 AM and there was no way he could be late. No time to waste, he sprints straight for the towering, sleek Asgard Knight Academy student dorm building. He hustled down the streets, spotting other students in the exact same uniform, and it felt no different from his old world at all, until he checked the map and knew his destination had to be just around the corner. A sleek black car rolls up to the curb and every arriving student's eyes snap to it. A young man and woman spot it too, and the woman clamps a hand over her mouth, shocked, because they can't believe who might be inside. They watch as the chauffeur swings open the rear door, and out steps a young man in a sharp, high-collared uniform with a flowing white cape, and the crowd instantly knows exactly who he is. Greeted by an Academy official, Lord Asgard, second prince of the Asgard Empire, slides a briefcase into the man's hands, then says he'd rather attend school by himself. The official jokes about his perfect humor, but the prince just stays steady and insists he's dead serious. He strode across the academy grounds, and the other students instinctively split aside, heads bowed, whispers chasing him as they called him royal blood, a combat prodigy, and a man of real honor. Even the Imperial Knights couldn't help but admire. His companions grumbled that because he hadn't flown a KOG, he barely made a splash. Then the prince snapped back, saying he clearly remembered that this student really had gone to the school. A blast of guards and onlookers surged through the courtyard, and every gaze locked onto one lone figure. He jabbed a finger straight at Kenya and shouted, "Hey, you there? Yeah, you." Kenya finally caught up and seized the moment. Then the prince snapped across the distance like lightning and smashed him hard across the face. He yanked Kenya's arm, his voice cutting with pure disdain, then snapped that he didn't care about her name at all. Only that device on his arm mattered, proof that he was just a second-class Imperial citizen. He then flicked his hand toward the whole area, snapping Kenya to look around. Kenya blinked in pure confusion, and the prince scoffed, asking why some second-class citizen looked so lost. Kenya tried to say his name, Mitsurugi, but the prince cut him off hard and ordered him to shut up. The prince tore into him, and then he finally noticed the others, Rin, Kaguya, and that other boy, all kneeling with perfect respect, like they knew the rules by heart, like this is exactly how a second-class citizen had to act in front of royalty. And that's when it hit him, he'd totally forgotten. He pushed through his lecture with a condescending sneer, laying out how this world works, how second class gets shoved just a little ahead of third, and reminding them they're alive only because the royal family allows it, yet Kenya still dared to stand. Clutching him by the collar, Lord Asgard leans and so close your chest tightens, eyes blazing with shock, his face twisted in fury as he barks that he wants to know why Kenya's showing zero gratitude. The confrontation jolts through him, like he's staring at a trap he already knows, straight out of a game where some low-level enemy slams the rules into the player. Panic crashes over him as the truth hits. This is a terrible mistake. His legs lock up, frozen to the spot. Rage simmers inside him as he fights to bury the memories of past bullying, but Lord Asgard misreads that tense look as stubborn defiance. Then a cruel grin blooms on the prince's face as he snaps back, accepting the challenge and declaring it will be so. Rin Sylphide watches from the side and declares this lesson is exactly what he needs to finally learn his place, even praising the prince for showing restraint instead of spilling blood, while Akagami Kaguya rolls her eyes and calls the whole spectacle a total waste of effort. The prince's patience finally shatters. He lunges his sword up, bellows so loud the air shakes, and declares Kenya from a defeated land is nothing but an inferior race, demanding she bow her head before royalty. Just as the blade starts to drop, Rin launches forward, begging them to hold on, then it's already over. The flat of the sword slams down with a brutal crack, and Kenya goes down hard, sprawled on the ground. He clamps a hand over his bruised face, groaning through the pain, and Rin looms over him, rushing out apologies to the prince while she snaps that he's just an idiot, then begs for mercy and vows she'll make sure he finally learns his lesson. Kenya's plea gets shut down with a brutal order to stay silent. Lord Asgard demands that Kenya apologize right now. Immediately, Rin and Kenya drop to the ground, bowing so low they're practically folded in half. With his cheek to the floor, Kenya lets out a desperate, shouted apology. He stays flat on the ground while Lord Asgard speaks to Rin, swallowing the fury and declaring he forgives them. no blood will spill this early in the morning, and orders her to stand down. One of his attendants backs him up, urging them to be thankful for his mercy. With his judgment slammed down, Lord Asgard and his entourage pivot and storm off, while the two students are left sprawled on the stone courtyard, crushed and humiliated. As they head out, Akagami Kaguya steps in and looms over Kenya, letting out a sharp, exasperated sigh at that wreck of a morning. Then she snaps at him and makes it crystal clear. Bow to the royal family, or you'll get executed for disrespect. She presses on with her lecture, snapping, "Are you even listening?" as she clocks his faraway stare. Then she cuts in sharply, declaring, "I'm Akagami Kaguya," just to yank his attention back. Her name slams him out of his trance, Kaguya. She blurts, and he snaps forward, throws his arms around her in a crushing hug, and leaves her totally frozen in shock. He starts to sob, rattled and furious, and Kaguya shoves him aside, snapping that he's not just an idiot but a pervert too, though when she looks at his face, something clicks and she suddenly recognizes him, the real one. Now he's slumped on the pavement, crying without holding back, and Kaguya finally asks why he's weeping. He chokes out an apology, says she reminded him of someone he lost, and then he earnestly thanks her for saving him. She gives his emotional explanation a quiet sigh like it doesn't matter, but he won't back down. He rises, reaches out, and introduces himself formally as Mitsurugi Kenya. He's frozen on the inside, still reeling from the fact that he just held the real Kaguya's hand, and she meets him with quiet empathy, admitting she can at least partly feel what he's going through, because in a world like this, everyone's fighting their own battle. She shrugs at his refusal, admits she's burning with the same kind of anger inside, and then he just freezes for a beat, eyes lighting up with a wide, blissful smile as he daydreams about how soft her hand felt. She snaps him out of his reverie, then turns to leave and tells him to hurry, too, right now. As she strides off, she flicks him a quick look over her shoulder and smirks, silently praising his courage. He blurts a heartfelt "thank you" as she walks away. His bright smile crumbles the second his eyes lock onto a flag with the Asgard crest, and the truth smacks him hard. This land, once called Yamato, is under Imperial control now. It dawns on him that in all his excitement he totally blanked on it, and worse, he'd been way too casual, calling Kaguya by her first name. Right beside him, Lord Asgard lets out a contemptuous scoff. He and the other fresh students march toward the towering academy building, now flying the Asgard Empire's flags high in the sky, a blazing reminder that the whole place is under their control. Surrounded by brutally armored guards, the grand entrance sign booms their destination out loud, the Asgard 13th Colony Knight Academy. Inside, the new students crowd into a huge courtyard for orientation, standing so still you could hear a pin drop. Up on a raised platform, an official speaks down to rows, calm, ordered, and silent, telling them that joining the academy makes them second-class citizens of the Empire. Then his voice hardens, sure they get that privilege, but now they're expected to serve. When the speech finally ends, Lord Asgard whips around to face his crew, Kaguya and Riene included, and declares, loud and certain, that they'll train with everything they've got to help the Empire grow. Kaguya just stares back with grim, unshakable determination. Their nightmare of being crushed started with the Asgard Empire, an unstoppable giant that ruled nearly half the world's land. This empire craved nothing short of total world conquest, and it wasted no time rolling its power right into Yamato, unleashing its terrifying air force. With their terrifying advanced weaponry, the Empire turned the skies and the land into a kill zone. Tanks thundered across the earth, smashing every last shred of resistance. Yamato's forces stood no chance against the Empire's ultimate tactical weapon, the Knight of Giant, or KOG, and were crushed so completely they couldn't even fight back. After the invasion crushed everything, Yamato's homeland had its name ripped away and its sovereignty stolen, until it was forced to become the Empire's 13th colony. To crush the people in conquered lands, the Empire stamped them into a cold hierarchy, second class and third class, until they were basically chained to the Empire like slaves. This whole past saga crashes us right into the present at the Asgard 13th Colony Knight Academy, where a spiky blonde man with goggles stands in front of the new recruits, arms locked tight. He faces the gathered citizens and declares it's an honor just to stand before them, then introduces himself as Sieg Sylphid, the military attaché of Colony 13, before announcing that he's been put in charge of this special district Knight Academy. His grand entrance rippled through the crowd. Some students whispered that he was the war god Sieg, while others stared in shock that the legend was standing right there. Sieg didn't blink. He kept talking, flat out saying he'd judge them purely on their skill, no tricks, no exceptions. And then he drove the point home. Inside these walls, only their own merit would decide everything. The students huddle and whisper, trying to digest the war god's decree. One insists that being first or second class means nothing here, another doubts what they're hearing, and a third just grimly accepts it. Every single one of them is getting shoved into the same brutal training. Akagami Kaguya's face tightens hard as she clocks what's happening. She saw it coming, but having to answer to the Empire's former strongest knight still feels like a major headache. Kenya Mitsurugi's faint, confident smile flickers across her lips, and that quiet reaction doesn't escape anyone's notice, though her worries clearly aren't everyone's concern. Kenya stands face to face with Sieg Sylphid, eyes blazing and unflinching as he dares the so-called war god to blink first, while Kaguya watches, remembering their earlier clash. Even with Lord Asgard standing right there, Kenya doesn't bow at all. He meets authority head-on, challenging it with every breath. When the assembly finally spills out, she strides through the academy halls, lost in thought about that boy. Was he just a fool or someone who mattered? She looks down at the photo in her hand. A snapshot of herself with a dark-haired young man. If Kenya's defiant eyes are the real deal, she wonders, then maybe he belongs with them. Her thoughts get ripped apart when a desperate cry erupts. Kenya. Kenya Mitsurugi barrels in at full speed, tears pouring down his face, and that's when it hits him. He's been put in the night department's Class E, yet he's only just now realizing he has no idea how she knows his name. His panic evaporates in the blink of an eye, and then, boom, he's back with a bright, easy greeting. He even waves, but Kaguya doesn't relax for a second because her mind races, hunting for whatever sneaky reason is hiding behind his sudden kindness. He slides into the seat right beside her, and she snaps, demanding to know why he picked the spot next to her. "Hold on," he says, calm as ever. "All right, here we go." Even if he walks up and greets her face to face, she decides she'll act like it never happened, because maybe she totally misjudged him. Yet the young man presses on anyway, introducing himself as Mitsurugi Kinyu and saying he's excited to work with her. Just as he starts to charm everyone, another student, Riene Sylphid, cuts in and fires up the whole class, telling them to get along as Yamato people, then whips around on Kenya and snaps, calling him an idiot and warning him not to use that word again. He's left stunned when she says that even using that term is punishable, and his face twists in shock as he blurts out, "Wait, are you serious?" Before he can even process it, the spiky-haired blonde student's voice blasts through the classroom, demanding silence, announcing that Lord Sama is joining their class and ordering everyone to make sure there's zero disrespect. At his command, every student, including a stunned Kenya and Kaguya, drops to one knee the instant Lord Asgard calmly strides into the room. He lifts a hand to the kneeling class, and Lord Asgard waves them calm. "Don't worry, I don't want to interrupt your training." As they stay kneeling, Kaguya mutters through her frustration that the prince really had to show up in their class of all places. Then she whips her gaze to Kaguya's, no, Kenya, and snaps that at the academy, kneeling isn't required anymore, so he'd better bow his head right next time. Kenya stays quiet and admits he just wasn't used to it. And now standing there, he tosses out a proverb, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do," then tells puzzled Kaguya he can't afford to die in a place like this, so he'll adapt and fight to survive. Kaguya watched him, stunned by that raw intensity, and Kenya's face hardened into pure resolve as he declared he had something urgent he just had to do. That stare, she knew it instantly, packed with iron resolve. He kept going, swearing he'd do whatever it took to reach his goal, and that only left her more baffled. Her thoughts spun out into a totally different conclusion. Was this some fresh pickup move? She flinched as he tightened his grip, then snapped that whatever this was, she refused to cause a scene and told him to go bother someone else. Her cutting, dismissive words hit him like a sucker punch, and the way she looked flustered made it feel even more brutal. He staggered back, his face burning with a blush as blood trickled from his lip, and then it hit him. This was the real power of Itsundra, so overwhelming it made him feel like he'd been seconds away from slipping into another plane of existence. His strange daydream got ripped apart the moment the class turned their eyes to the front, because right there, a new figure had shown up and a low buzz spread through the line fast. "Wait, is that the Ice Princess?" One student blurted and another snapped back, "Yeah, look at her long silver hair." His eyes snapped wide, locked onto her. Right there in his pupils, her elegant silhouette burned bright, and for a split second he just froze, stunned into the truth. Her beauty wasn't just a rumor, it was absolute. Kaguya's eyes snapped to him, mild surprise written all over her face, and she told him she couldn't believe he even knew who the legendary Ice Princess was. Her eyes stayed locked on him, and her hands clenched tight as she grilled the newcomer's reputation. Because the word was this girl was a legit prodigy, a KOG pilot on the same level as the best, and she was only 16. Like she'd been called by the words themselves, a figure burst into the doorway. She was the silver-eyed princess, Sieg's daughter, the war god himself. Silver hair spilled over a calm, distant face, and with one hand she held a small case. Her eyes snapped open, sharp, focused, and way too intense for someone who looked like a simple composter. Yep, this was Riene Sylphid. Inside the academy classroom, a new girl steps into the spotlight, Riene Sylphide, the other heroine, and her cool confidence hits the room like a spark because all she can think about is one mission. She's determined to save someone. When Kenya Mitsurugi sees her, he's instantly wrecked. Tears pour down his face as he stares, stunned by her beauty, chanting in his mind how precious she is. Beside him, Akagami Kaguya just watches with a deadpan look like, so this is what you're really like when you finally meet Riene for real. What? Kaguya clocks him with a sharp jab, demanding why he's staring at the Empire's girl like he's hopelessly in love, then pressing him about jealousy. Kenya's flustered so badly, he can only stammer that everything that happened has brought them to this moment. They say first impressions make or break everything, and he strides right up to Reina with guts, introducing himself as Mitsurugi Kenya and beaming that he's thrilled to meet her. From their desks, the other students stare in total shock, hanging on the edge of their seats, wondering if he's really got the nerve to talk to her. Without even glancing his way, Reina snaps back instantly, cold, ruthless, and totally dismissive, telling him she wants nothing to do with him and ordering him to never speak to her again. With one savage strike, he smashes out a blast of unbearable cold that freezes him mid-step, like death itself has grabbed his soul. Totally trapped inside a shell of ice, he makes the whole scene look terrifying, and Kaguya can't help but smirk as she watches, saying he's got real nerve because this is the legendary ice princess going all out. But trapped in the ice, Kinyo bursts with pure joy, cheering that Rena's cold, solitary vibe is exactly what she should be, even trying to rally everyone to notice and admire it, and that wild reaction leaves Kaguya completely stunned and lost for words. A man with wild, long, light hair tied back grins as he strikes a dramatic pose in front of the classroom, then laughs, "I'm Alfred, the instructor," and welcomes everyone with open arms. His loud intro cuts off the second his eyes lock onto a certain student. He freezes, staring in stunned recognition at the seated prince, Lord Asgard. Kenya and Reina, along with the rest of the class, all look on from their desks. He steadies himself in a snap and drops into a deep, formal bow, then blurts out an apology for his lack of manners, saying it's an honor to meet the prince, while quietly panicking that the academy could be a burden for someone like him. Prince stays icy calm and tells Alfred to stop worrying. He admits he got into the school for his own selfish reasons, says he's already warned the class, and insists he be treated like any other student. From his seat, Kenya watches the whole exchange unfold, and deep down he realizes it. No matter how the prince keeps reassuring him, the instructor looks razor tense. Then Alfred leans in and offers a weird, unsettling word of thanks. As soon as the formal exchange ended, he whipped around to face the whole class and declared his big goal: every single student would push themselves to become a pilot. To prove his point, a hologram blasts into existence, an enormous armored suit forming from nothing. Then he grins and tells them he'll teach them the skills to command a Knight of Giant, or KOG, the Empire's prized tactical weapon. He ends his speech by dropping the ultimate incentive: prove you can pilot, and you'll earn the prestigious title of Knight, marked by a glowing crest. He keeps talking, then lays down the rules. First years are to claw for knighthood, but they also have to train and steer the second years, blazing a path they'll have to copy. He grabs the second-class students' attention and fires them up, telling them knighthood is still within reach if they've got the talent. Then he just says, "Give it your all." And with that, he wraps up orientation and orders everyone to check their schedules on their own devices. And right as he does, Kenya Mitsurugi glances at his screen, his eyes widening a bit as he reads. The students are marched into a giant hangar packed with massive KOG simulators, and Alfred steps up to announce their first test, an aptitude evaluation powered by the very machines they're about to face. He tells them, if you read the manual we handed out earlier, you'll run those simulators just fine, and Mitsurugi just stands there, one bead of sweat sliding down his brow. Even with the pressure crushing him, Mitsurugi's grin blooms wide as he tells his classmates, "Yeah, it's a bummer this isn't a real Knight of Giant, but I'm still pumped." They just stare back with dead, confused faces. He whips his head toward Akagami Kaguya and hisses, asking why everyone looks so miserable, clearly fed up that he's using her first name again. She smirks and tells him to just watch, saying he'll get it, while deep down she basically shrugs it off as nothing but a staged performance. With the students packed in front of the simulators, Instructor Alfred bears a sharp, predatory grin, then snaps his arm forward and blasts. The evaluation starts now. Inside the simulation, the fight is lightning fast and ruthlessly violent. One pilot heckles his opponent, sneering that they can't match his moves, then lands one final, crushing strike, stands over the wrecked machine, and orders the loser to retreat and drill the controls until they're burned into memory. On a giant monitor, the other students stare as the one-sided fight plays out, and Mitsurugi clocks the massive power gap instantly, face set in grim seriousness, while Kaguya watches with a hard, uneasy understanding. As the defeated student slips out of his simulator, Instructor Alfred barrels right in and demands answers. How dare the kid just stand there when his performance wasn't even worthy of the name, Max. His voice snaps into a full-throated shout, ordering the student to stop wasting time, while the young man flinches hard, visibly rattled by the instructor's blazing fury. Then he surges forward and rips the student by the hair, yanking his head back with brutal force. Alfred snarls that his voice is way too weak, and that admitting defeat with those exact words was a painfully bad pick. Tucked into that brutal pain posture, the student sobs with his whole chest, tears pouring as he screams his defeat, and then he roars out aloud thanks to the instructor for the help, even as a second-class student. This humiliation lights up a grin on Alfred's face, and the instructor cheers about how amazing it feels, while another first-class brat beside him cackles that the second class will spend the rest of their lives bowing in submission. Right after the instructor shows off, another top-ranked student, Simika, a heavy-set young brute, pushes in toward Akagami Kaguya with a smug, condescending grin, congratulating her on her luck and offering to personally coach her through the test, while Kaguya shoots back a glare packed with annoyance and ironclad determination. With Kaguya locked into her simulator cockpit, her eyes snap to the display as the countdown screams 3, and she steadies her nerves. She's memorized the manual cover to cover and knows these controls inside out, so it should be fine. When the number 2 hits the screen, her calm confidence ignites into pure, ferocious resolve. She slaps her own cheeks to snap her mind sharp, locks in for the fight, and declares out loud that she's got this. The countdown slams to 1, and from the observation area, Simika grins like a villain, cold, thrilled, because he can't wait to watch some serious tough guy break and end up crying in pure frustration. The countdown slams to 0 and a massive holographic sign bursts to life. One word flashes: fight. The clash is about to begin. On the virtual battlefield, 2 massive KOG units materialize out of thin air. Kenya Mitsurugi watches from the sidelines, silent and locked in, hoping Kaguya comes out swinging. The battle kicks off with brutal, unstoppable force. Semiko breaks into laughter and needles the newbie as Kaguya's mech gets smashed on the spot. Locked in her cockpit, Kaguya roars at her opponent not to underestimate her, gripping her shield tight as impact slams in. Her defiance crumbles in an instant. One brutal hit sends her KOG slamming to the ground, fully defeated. The mech towers over the wreckage, and the pilot's bored voice drifts through the wreckage. Is that it, really? Demanding something more to entertain them. Simika watches the powerhouse mowing through multiple KOG units like it's nothing, then yells at the pilot to stop backing off too far, because bullying Kaguya any harder would be downright pitiful. Kaguya glares straight back, her resolve locked in and unshaken. Her grit turns into action. Kaguya dives in and flies her own KOG straight into the chaos. As she blocks a strike, confidence surges in her chest and she finally clicks with the controls. She's whispering to herself that she's getting better, and with this momentum, she might actually stand a chance. As the brutal fight drags on, the crowd starts whispering and judging. Seneca's temper flares as he can't stand the first-class student playing with his opponent for this long, wondering if he's trying to embarrass himself in front of His Highness. Another student cranes to see if it looks grim, but his partner snaps it down fast. There's no way their champion is going to lose. Back in the arena, the first-class student KOG snaps in with a heavy hit. The crowd begs Kaguya to quit, saying she's just a second-class student and her opponent is only messing with her, but Reina Sylphide keeps her eyes locked on the fight because something about this feels horribly wrong. Mitsurugi watched from another angle and snapped into a shocking realization. He muttered that the opponent was dragging the fight on purpose, even cranking the damage with a handicap system, just to mess with the outcome. Simika raged and called Kaguya cocky, but Mitsurugi just gave her a quiet nod, praising her work. With these new conditions, Kaguya spots a crack in the chaos. She lunges her weapon forward and smashes into KOG with a thunderous burst of energy, so much power that, for the first time, hope sparks in her chest like, wait, I might actually win. What? But the moment hope sparks, it's stomped out. When the final scoreboard snaps on, her opponent is crowned with a perfect win. Kaguya's left staring, totally stunned, because she can't figure out why she couldn't break through. Just nearby, Seneca lets out a breath like he survived a disaster, admitting that the close call made his skin crawl. Then he shrugs it off, saying he just handed the opponent a tiny spotlight. But Kaguya knows the truth. Something was deeply wrong with that match. Her suspicion snapped into full certainty. She storms up to Sematka and yells that the match feels wrong. He shrugs, pops open a drink, and casually says it's because he's a philanthropist, which ignites her fury even hotter. Mitsurugi rushes in beside her, trying to get her to calm down as she seethes. She wouldn't swallow that ending for a second. She screamed that her opponent was rigging the match, insisting the damage numbers looked way too weird to be real, while Lord Asgard just listened with a sharp, dismissive click of his tongue. With his patience snapping, he lunged forward and yanked her by the collar of her uniform, Mitsurugi's eyes flew wide at the sudden brutality, while Kaguya choked out a gasp. The force slammed her onto the ground, and Riene Sylphide leaned over the fallen Kaguya, blood leaking from the corner of her mouth, then said with ice-cold certainty that her approval didn't matter. Lord Asgard snapped another order into the air, his face twisted in pure fury. He jabbed a finger at Kaguya and demanded that whoever lost had to kneel, bow to the winner, and swallow defeat. Simika's voice boomed back at him as she stepped out with a crooked, triumphant grin, and she barked that the losers had to obey the winners, no exceptions. If she couldn't handle that, then tough luck, she wouldn't belong in this world. Then he sneered that if she crawled back to being third class, she'd get a fate even uglier than a Vestox. His taunt sparked a storm of jeers, and around them the students' faces twisted into nasty, mocking sneers as they erupted in laughter at her misery. While the crowd jeered, Reina leaned in close to the trembling Kaguya and snapped, "Stop crying. If you do, it'll look like we're bullying you." Then she reminded Kaguya she just taught her how this world works. Her words snapped Kaguya's resolve in half, tears poured down her face as the reality hit. She just arrived in this world and should have laid low. Right beside her, Mitsurugi stared on with his hand clenched into a shaking fist, swallowing every urge as he fought to stay perfectly still, determined to do nothing. Rage burned in his chest as Simika kept humiliating Akagami Kaguya, yanking her chin and smirking that her face wasn't terrible, then tossing out a disgusting offer: she'd be his exclusive sex slave. He sneered that if she served him right, she'd deliver a top-tier child, have zero regrets, and right now all she was good for was to bow her head. As Mitsurugi finally snapped past his restraint and sputtered that it was his loss, Simika swung around with a taunting grin and flicked his hand like it didn't matter, then claimed he couldn't hear a single word. Then he lunged in to slam Kaguya down to her knees, until Mitsurugi shot in and yanked Simika's arm to stop him cold. Kaguya blinked up at him, stunned, as Mitsurugi told her she didn't have to go through with this. Fury flared in Simika's eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" But Mitsurugi only said the earlier victory was Kaguya's. Simika sneered at Mitsurugi's sudden jump-in, mocking him with sarcastic questions about whether he needed guidance, and Mitsurugi stayed cool, admitting straight up that his rough, informal way of speaking was disrespectful. Then Semicus brightened, asking if Mitsurugi liked the way he'd shown his power. He clenched his fist, and a violent tremor of emotion shook through it. He knew he had to stay invisible, but he couldn't erase what Kaguya had done that morning when she could have walked right past him. Seeing her tear-streaked face, he realized the Kaguya he loved hadn't changed a bit, even after being thrown into this brand new world. That hit like a spark, and his resolve hardened. What he had to do was crystal clear, and it wasn't going to change, even if it meant risking everything and losing. But none of that mattered. He swore his mission was to protect the heroines, no matter the cost, even if it meant dropping to his knees in the buff. And Simika flinched at the thought, while Mitsurugi shoved back, eyes blazing, daring him harder, because if Simika lost, he'd never be allowed to touch Kaguya again. Simika's challenge detonates in rage. He twists his face into a sneer, shouts that Mitsurugi is just a second-class student, and slams down his terms. Lose, and Mitsurugi becomes Simika's slave forever, while Kaguya stands nearby, eyes wide with real fear. He brushes off the outburst and locks his eyes on Kaguya, cupping her chin with gentle confidence. "It's my turn now," he says, and swears he'll return the favor like he promised back this morning. Kaguya just stares, eyes huge, mouth shut, completely unable to speak. Then he flicks a glance over his shoulder at Lord Asgard, who's been watching the whole exchange and, with zero hesitation, asks for permission to kick off the duel. Kaguya lunges in fast, saying he doesn't need to get involved, but Mitsurugi flashes a brilliant, confident smile and shuts her down, claiming the deal is sealed, reminding her to keep her promise, while Alfred watches them all with a hard, unmoving stare. Alfred squints, trying to figure out who that student really is, and why he's got such weird confidence in his bones. Right beside him, Lord Asgard warns that the instructor can't let a single thing happen on his watch. Alfred fires off a quick promise to Kaguya that everything's going to be fine, then he officially greenlights the duel, saying they'll be safe as long as the handicap system stays in place. Once the green light was secured, Mitsurugi slid a hand onto Lord Asgard's shoulder, told him to trust him, then snapped his focus to Kaguya, her worry still etched on her face, and declared with total certainty, "I'll win." He climbs the stairs to the pilot's seat, and the moment he settles in, he realizes this is the first real fight he's had since landing in this world, and that makes him exhale in relief. He scans the controls and boom, the cockpit is just like in the game, right down to the details. He drops into his machine with a confident smirk, locks eyes with his opponent, Semika, and with arms crossed he declares he'll make Semika welcome him the right way. Then Semika flashes a nasty, toothy grin and tightens his cravat like a predator ready to strike. Inside the cockpit of his Knight of Gold, KOG, his sword surveys his locked-in loadout, a gun, a shield, and a one-handed blade. That controller, something he swears he's seen more times than his own parents' faces, hits him like a memory, so familiar it feels like it's been in his hands forever. A wave of calm crashes over him like he's home. First time here, sure, but it still feels familiar, and for him, the cockpit is the most comforting place in the whole world. As the mock battle kicks off, Kog Ikez takes his stance, but in the stands, Lord Asgard and the others stare in confusion, wondering why Sword's unit, Gunner, Serpent won't move, because they're sure it has zero chance of winning. Simica, the Eek's pilot, smirks like he owns the sky. He swears he won't get beaten by some second-class nobody, then barrels forward, and his mech's weapon swings down for a finish. From the sidelines, Akagami Kaguya watches with a worried face, asking herself what kind of world this even is, and what she's supposed to do inside it, even though her answers still won't come. Simica's panic gets totally ignored as Simica's roar slices through the air. Your pathetic life ends now. But Sword just sits there, calm as ice, cycling through his controls, feeling every response like it's his own body, and then wondering out loud if his opponent was only bluffing earlier, terrified to make a move. Semica slams his weapon into the ground where Serpent the Gunner was standing, only to hit absolutely nothing. Then he snaps his head up in pure disbelief as KOG swords hover in midair, and Semica panics, scrambling around, unable to make sense of where Serpent just vanished to. Illusion shattered through the virtual arena. Inside his cockpit, Sword grinned like a winner, smugly claiming he was the world's strongest, while Simica could only think, Abu wildered, huh, as Abu's unit tore itself apart. The moment hit like lightning, and the simulation system snapped it into place. Boom, a hard victory screen flashed for 2P Kenya. Then the match dumped the student spectators into stunned silence, and Lord Asgard with his crew just stared at the screen, murmuring in disbelief, because no one could figure out what they just witnessed or how Simica could have been beaten. Alfred, the instructor, broke the fusion into the air and watched the whole thing unfold with wide-eyed shock, because that last hit landed clean in Simica's blind spot, so brutal and instant he couldn't even hit her with the handicap. Straight away he snapped that it had to be a device malfunction, refusing to believe the outcome, while Riene's Sylphid hovered nearby, staring in silence, wondering if it really was just a glitch. Semica's ears caught the declaration like sweet music. He burst out laughing in his cockpit, pouncing on a malfunction as cover, while Alfred, right then, doubled down and snapped that it was unbelievable. Most people never noticed the student beside him smirking hard, gripping a control panel. He just cranked the handicap to max, bragging that one single shot would now drain every last drop of Sword's HP. Then the interference hit and the simulation lurched sideways. Simica was back in the fight, suddenly boxed in by multiple KOG units all gunning for him. He screamed in disbelief as his own attacks wouldn't land on Sword's unit, while he got hammered by relentless blows. The Sword snapped in, calling him out for unfair tricks and demanding a clean fight as phantom KOGs swarmed in, while, from his cockpit, Sword watched everything with icy calm. Then he went straight at Simica and his ally, flipping their accusations back on them and claiming they were the real cheats. He instantly proves his claim isn't hot air. His KOG unit dodges the incoming fire, then in a blur of motion, it smashes one of the attacker's machines to pieces with a single, brutal strike. A sudden unit goes down and Semica gets rocked by the shockwave. He can only stammer in disbelief that it's already over for his ally. Meanwhile, from inside his own cockpit, Sword's face turns stone-cold focused as he snaps, time to finish this, sure he can recreate the exact same level of skill he just showed. He braces for his next move, eyes laser-focused, and even the onlookers feel the tension in the air. Reina Sulfide watches with wide, worried eyes, sensing trouble brewing. Inside the simulation, Swords brandishes his blade and hones in on his next target. He unleashes a technique that smashes the simulator's limits, Night Maneuver, Lightning Flurry, and the instant it hits, Akagami Kaguya can only gape in pure awe while Simica lets out a terrified shriek at how impossible fast it is. The assault spirals into one last, brutal blow. His KOG unit crashes through another opponent, and the explosion hits like a victory bell for player one. When the fight finally ends, he sinks back into his cockpit, eyes sharp and thinking hard, because the simulator just doesn't hit the real thing the same, and still, he can't wait to dig deeper and test what else it can do. The skill hits like lightning. Every student in the simulation audience explodes into cheers, staring in total disbelief at what they just saw. He tore himself away from the simulator and left Alfred to wrestle with the impossible result, while the instructor clutched his mouth in shock, baffled at how a second-year student could win with zero special training. Then it hit him. Sword's power matched a holy knight, maybe even surpassed it. When he finally hit the observation area, his classmates mobbed him, first pure shock, then straight-up awe. They fired off praise like fireworks, calling his performance incredible and even saying he might be their hope, until he was left completely stunned. Right in the middle of all that cheering, Rene Sylphide kept her eyes on him, silent as ever, but clearly digging for the truth of who he really was. The whole crowd held its breath as Akagami Kaguya stepped forward with eyes full of sincerity, called out Mitsurugi's name, and delivered a simple, heartfelt thank you. Then he spun back to her, shock flickering across his face. That surprise didn't last. It snapped into a teasing grin, and he leaned in like, "So, you're gonna give me a kiss, right?" Kaguya's face instantly went bright red, eyes blown wide as she sputtered out pure disbelief. He erupted into laughter, waved his hands like it didn't matter, and said it was only a joke. Then the grin faded and his real request hit. He told them to drop the formalities, asked her to call him Kenya, and promised he'd call her Kaguya if she let him. She took in his request, cheeks warming up as she asked if making it special was okay, and when he flashed that bright, real smile, he gave her a thumbs up and told her he was genuinely grateful. Then he added, "Just call me whatever you want." While Simika stood there, her student's sword had just crushed him in one clean strike from afar, his face gone chalk pale, twisted with pure horror, sweat hammering down his brow. He stammered that this wasn't how it was supposed to happen, then spun around and staggered off like he couldn't even hold himself together. That crushing humiliation hit so hard he doubled over and vomited onto the floor, and right away the nearby students, including the spiky-haired blonde, reeled back, gawking and shouting as the disgusting mess filled the room. So heavy that two of his classmates had to strain just to drag him off, grumbling about his weight and the foul stench rolling off him. And from across the room, Alfred snaps impatiently for them to hurry and take Simika to the clinic, while Lord Asgard watches, pinches the bridge of his nose, and lets out a frustrated sigh at how totally disastrous this has turned. Lord Asgard, surrounded by his peers, strides up and blows off the students with a cold attitude. Then he jabs a finger at Kinya Mitsurugi, crowning him the winner of the last fight, and dares anyone to step forward and prove the Empire's might. No one moves, the crowd just stares as the prince's challenge hangs in the air. Anyone could have stepped up to the princess challenge, but the students split in an instant, making a path for a young woman with long, flowing hair, who marched right through their ranks and owned the whole room. He slams to a stop right in front of Kenya, and her razor-sharp eyes lock onto him, Mitsurugi Kenya, every syllable. Then she asks, straight-faced, if she can fix what he said earlier. He's thrown off, but he nods, and he promises he won't mind one bit. Her eyes slammed into his, and she jutted a finger straight at him as she dropped the bombshell. "I'm interested in you." Her stare hit with a sly grin, not threats. Then he pointed back at her and with total calm, asked what she'd do for him if he actually won their little implied contest. He leans in, smirks, and keeps talking like it's all a game, asking if she'll call him Kenyakuan and if he can call her Riene, then cuts the idea loose as just a joke. But in his head, he can't ignore it. That icy glare of hers is seriously thrilling. Meanwhile, back in the background, a flustered Lord Asgard waves his hand like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Her flippant demand gets shot down with total disgust. She sneers, calls him a freak, and spits out the question of whether he's actually trying to make her drop to her knees naked. She swears she hates the idea. Kanya, though, just seems to have expected this kind of reaction, even if he's weirdly intrigued by it. Reina, drawn in a cleaner, simpler style, watches in confusion and blurts out the real question, so this is what he truly wants. Even with those sharp words on her tongue, her face loosens when she catches sight of that weird little wish. She admits she doesn't fully get it, but then she gives in. Fine, but very well. Yet the thoughts in her head betray her straight away, because she can't stop thinking how ridiculously cute it is. Right nearby, Lord Asgard snaps a sharp throat clear in pure annoyance while his buddies trade jabs and jokes. The spiky-haired student playfully yanks at another, who erupts in complaints, and Akagami Kaguya just watches, stone-cold unimpressed. Meanwhile, Kinya Mitsurugi's fist tightens like a promise, vow packed in silence. With a smug grin, he snaps his focus to Reina Sylphide and tells her he's handing the whole thing to her. Then Reina just answers, steady and certain, yes. His gaze snaps to Kenya and his face hardens. He insists he knows Kenya is aware, but there's no way they'll let any second-class student rise to the very top of the class. Lord Asgard stands by the aide and snaps that he won't tolerate a single more disgrace in front of His Highness, while the aide nods and says they need to prove what a first-class student is truly capable of. His sharp voice slices through the air, aimed straight at Lord Asgard. She warns that if he so much as tries something unwarranted, she'll slam the fight to a stop and report him to the higher-ups on the spot. He flinches, teeth clenched. She then steps right up to Kenya, and he tries to smooth things over by saying they could get along, but she shuts him down cold, making it clear she's got zero plans to be that friendly with him. The talk ends, boom, the duel kicks off. Inside his combat unit, Kenyak sizes up the challenge in front of him, knowing the Ice Princess won't fall in line while he's in this condition. Still, he grins and thinks, all right, let's see what you can really do. Resolve hits and bam, overwhelming force crashes down. A colossal explosion rips across the battlefield. Inside the simulator, Kenya stares in disbelief, stunned that Reina is already operating at this level. Then from some unknown source, one lone word booms through the air: disappointed. He barely throws up a block in time. Boom, the hit rattles his machine, and inside the cockpit his jaw clenches as it finally clicks. He let his guard slip. That close call snaps him into instant mode. His mind races, crunching what just happened, hunting every blind spot in his opponent's moves. He figures it out fast. If he tracks the machine's exact position right before it disappears, he can predict which vulnerability it's going to strike. If she's going for one crushing, decisive strike, then her target has to be the cockpit, because going all in like that boxes her sword in, and that's exactly what gives her opponent an opening. As he hatches his counterplan, Reina locks onto his reaction with a sharp, calculating stare, because her attack should have slipped clean out of his sight, landing right in a dead blind spot. In his own cockpit, Kenya checks the same thing, a grim smile spreading as he admits that's exactly what he was counting on. Their blades stay locked while the psychological clash rages on. Reina admits he's sharp and says using tricks on him only shows how confident he is. Kenya thanks her, saying his foresight comes from knowing her too well. Then he smirks and tells her cryptically that she'll see it soon, and that she needs to stop playing games. Meanwhile, the crowd can't catch its breath. They're rocked by the raw intensity and razor-sharp skill. Kaguya watches with a slight tremble, realizing these two fighters aren't just strong, they're on a whole different level, 100 times beyond her. Beside her, Lord Asgard tightens his fist, swallowing his frustration as he admits plain and simple that compared to them, he's still miles behind. The duelists feel the fight crushing down on them. Kenya grins like he's buzzing, amazed by Reina's strength even as he knows she still has tons to sharpen. Meanwhile, Reina's face burns with pure frustration. She can't remember pushing this hard in a battle since the day she fought her own father. Her sudden confession hits him like a jolt, and his heart starts hammering as flustered panic takes over, because this is not the moment for feelings like that, and he can't stop thinking. Is it even fair to win a match under these circumstances? He weighed the terrifying cost of becoming the top student, because the second class was already getting treated like trash, and if he clawed his way to first, he feared the bullying would spiral all the way to assassination, with them seeing him as the danger. His mind sprinted, replaying how his own body moved on instinct to help Kaguya, because getting even more eyes on him would trap his freedom, but this chaos also felt like a golden opening. In the middle of the clash, he mouthed an apology to Reina, and his KOG sword swing suddenly faltered, so she froze, wondering if this was a real opening or a nasty trap, because in that heartbeat she finally understood his move. Her unit's torso was wide. With a deafening crash, his blade drove home and landed a savage, life-ending hit on Reina's machine. The duel's final strike landed, the screen blasted *1p Riene win *. Even after the hit, Kenya managed a small, stubborn smile, certain there was still something he had to do, so she wouldn't be calling him Kenyakan ***. Up in her cockpit, Riene stared at the result, completely thrown off. In the viewing area, Lord Asgard was pounding his hands together, shouting that it was an excellent fight, exactly what you'd expect from the war god's daughter. Right next to him, another student sneered, laughing at Class 2 for their loss. Elsewhere, other students huddled and dissected what just happened. One admitted they'd lost, but Kenya battled the ice princess like a monster, and his friend practically gushed that his performance was unreal, while Kaguya, standing nearby, stayed dead silent, eyes locked forward as she replayed that final moment in her head. The victor felt no joy at all. Inside the cockpit, Riene tore into the fight's aftermath, stunned by how Kenya's KOG movements had felt off, and wondered if he'd lured her into attacking until the real answer hit harder. He didn't overpower her, he held back, taking pity on her. Her confusion snapped into rage. She grabbed Kenya by the uniform and demanded answers for what he'd done. Kenya tried to tell her to wait, but she wouldn't hear it, and in that moment he finally understood. Reina's calm was gone, and the fury was real. He dodged her question and went straight into a deep, formal bow. Then his voice boomed as he declared his loss, thanking her again and again for guiding him, even if he was just a second-class student. The students huddled and murmured, stunned by her quiet, humble vibe, but Riene just froze solid, completely lost, and couldn't understand why all of this was happening. Her confusion snapped into a loud shout. She couldn't even wrap her head around it, insisting he was way better than her. He snapped his eyes away, dodging her piercing glare, then urged her to calm down, like she of all people should somehow get his logic, yet the way he kept avoiding her only made her rage burn hotter. Then he slid into a quick apology, dipping his head as if it weighed a ton, and admitted he hadn't been thinking clearly enough. His apology didn't end things, it sparked a new offer. He said if it was just the two of them, they could finally cut loose for real. The words lingered in the air while she absorbed them, her face burning with fury, then slowly slipping into deep thought. Her eyes locked onto him, his face flashing in her pupils as his sudden proposal hit her like a wave, right there, after the public match, in the heavy silence where every word felt dangerous. After a beat, her eyes snapped into focus, no more hesitating. She jabbed a finger at him, voice razor-sharp, and accepted his terms like a final verdict. "This is a promise," she said, "and you better keep it." A calm, confident smile spread across his face, like he'd been waiting for her to say yes. She looked stunned for half a second, then a soft blush crept up her cheeks as she breathed his name, her voice crackling with surprise and pure, shaky anticipation. Kenya Mitsurugi gets hit with emotion so hard it knocks the breath out of him. Tears pour down his face as he squeezes his fists tight, and one thought pounds in his head. Riene said his name. He keeps writing that private victory in his head, convinced his plan crushed every expectation, sure. He'd been terrified she'd shut him down, but somehow he got through to her, and he even started imagining that secret meeting he set up with her was basically a date until Riene strides over and snaps him back to reality. Her face hardens as she looks him straight in the eyes, chewing him out for burning energy on total rookies, then orders him to start sparring with top-tier first years, right now. And with a razor glare, she warns that if he can't handle it, she'll step in and deal with him herself. Riene stepped in and the bullying-style brawls finally stop. So after the match, even the spiky blonde guy who got beaten thanks his opponent like he means it, and the loss doesn't sting with shame anymore, but now a bigger threat looms. Nobody's been able to take down a first-class student yet. After that one real win, the whole vibe among the students flips overnight, sure. Losing still stings, but now everyone's mood suddenly lifts. Kenya instantly feels the shift. Friendly classmates close in, grin, and ruffle his hair like they've known him forever. And when he looks back at his old life as a total loner, he finally realizes this place has changed everything. In the classroom, Alfred watches the instructor wrap up the day's lesson, then hears him announce that tomorrow their training kicks into full gear and that serious drills are coming. Just before everyone heads out, the instructor leans in and says he's got one last thing to tell them. Attention snaps to one student in particular. Alfred slams his finger at him and yells, "Mitsurugi Kenya, just because you're a little capable, don't let your head swell." Kenya's new friend beside him stares in shock at the sudden outburst. Kenya just stands there, shell-shocked by the instructor's final words, while his classmates, the spiky blonde kid and the short dark-haired one, snicker that he's totally grabbed the instructor's attention now. Akagami Kaguya brushes it off like it's nothing, insisting the instructor only said it to save face, then tells Kenya, "I'll see you later." And the second it hits, Kenya crumples onto his desk, overwhelmed, cursing that he stood out way too damn much. Still reeling from that unwanted attention, Reina Sylphide strides up to him, calls his name, and asks if he's got a moment after this. He jerks his gaze up, surprised, blurts Kaguya by accident, then snaps himself shut. He snaps his hands together in a rush of apology, bows low, and tells Reina he's already booked for the day, while inside, he's bursting with joy that she even invited him, even though his schedule comes first. With one last goodbye, he breaks down and apologizes to Riene again, then asks to swap contact info before he goes. She just watches him disappear, her face saying nothing, and with a quiet nod, she agrees to meet him tomorrow. Down the corridor, Akagami Kaguya paces with burning impatience, stuck wondering why everything's taking so long, while Kenya barrels through the distance, sprinting to catch up with her. He finally catches up to her, breathing hard, and blurts out that he wants tea with her, then tells her there's so much he's dying to ask. She whips her head toward him with a smirk and goes, "So, which pervert was just melting over the imperial girl?" Right as the light-haired student strides by, he shoots back that it's impossible for someone like Kenya to be mixed up with both of them. Kenya's cheeks burn. He can't help thinking maybe it was a mistake to jump into this mess with two women that fast, but he insists there were real, deeper reasons behind what he did. Her teasing smile fades, a blush blooms across her cheeks, and she quickly explains she isn't refusing him. Today just isn't the right moment. Then she promises, "I'll go with you another day." She insists she's not lying, then he's left stunned, still catching up to her words, and all he can manage is that shaky, disbelieving, "Are you really?" His disbelief crumbles and a wave of emotion slams into him. Tears spill down his face before he can even stop them, stunned that he's actually crying over something like this. He tries to yank his face out of the spotlight, swearing to himself it's not a big deal, but Kaguya's stunned. She blurts, "What's with your feelings?" He wipes a tear and wonders out loud if he's just overflowing with joy, and Kaguya's eyes widen like the truth just clicked for her too. His mind slips back to the past, back when rejection felt normal, and for him, being alone was just how life had always been. Because of everything that happened before, the moment someone actually wants Asterisk to stick around, he gets hit with a brand new rush of happiness he can't hold back. Seeing how wrecked he feels, Kaguya snaps into action. She blurts out a bold idea on the spot. They should swap contact info right now. He nods right away, still wiping at his eyes as he holds up his device, and Kaguya raises hers too, wearing that faint, knowing smile, thinking for a split second that she's totally being taken advantage of, then she shoves the thought away. As they swap devices to punch in their info, Kaguya can't shake the feeling that he's a total weirdo. What kind of person is he anyway? She trudges into her place, drained to the bone from day one, and decides to crash early. Then she slips past the entrance and leaves her boots right there. The moment she steps into her living space, she freezes solid. Curtains ripple in a breeze from a window she's 100% sure she left shut. In a blink, a masked intruder bursts from the shadows and slashes forward with a knife. Kaguya freezes, panic spiking as she scrambles to figure out if her real identity got exposed and how this person slipped past every one of her traps. The attacker comes at her with a lightning barrage of strikes, and Kaguya snaps back, parrying everything, until the intruder grabs her wrist in a flash and yanks her weapon away. She snaps into action, spinning her body to slam the intruder down and cinch him in a submission hold. Then she pins him to the floor, furious, demanding to know why he sneaked into her room. The man taps her foot, admitting defeat. The second he yanks off his mask, Kaguya's eyes flare wide with shock. Could that be her father? He tells her guard is a little too relaxed, but one thing's clear: she hasn't skipped a single day of training. Later, once they were both done changing, her father finally showed up to check on her, knowing full well she'd just slipped into a hostile empire. Kaguya steadied him with a calm smile, telling him she was okay and that she'd even gotten a warm welcome. Then she glanced at the nearby picture of the slum people and basically shrugged, saying this doesn't even touch the real suffering she's seen. This is Akagami Isshin, once a lieutenant general in the Yamato army, now the spark behind Amaterasu, leading the Yamato Liberation Alliance and rallying the resistance against them. He keeps battering through the fight to reclaim Yamato, and the survivors from the old army scatter across Colony 13, scrambling in the chaos, while his daughter Kaguya jumps in with her own combat units to back him up. Even with the fight raging around him, all he can think about is his daughter. He tells everyone he understands her mission, but if anything happens to her, he'll never be able to face her mother or the guilt he carries. She takes a sip from her mug, like she's heard this speech from him 100 times, and then she drops the usual comfort. Straight up, she drills him for the real reason he came. He finally gets it. If he's willing to travel all this way just to see her face to face, then this has to mean something huge. His urgency snaps into focus the moment he drops the bombshell. The Takeoka Federation is finally moving. He declares the time has come to reclaim Yamato, and Kaguya is left stunned. The Takeoka Federation is a total giant on the world stage, the biggest confederation of nations on the planet, run by the heavyweight superpower Chubu, and its clout only gets matched by the Asgard Empire. With this revelation locked in, Isshin lays out the plan. Yamato has stayed on pure defensive mode for 5 brutal years since the Empire rolled in, but now that Chubu has stepped up, they're finally ready to unleash a full-scale offensive. Tells her they're planning an operation soon, and that news lights a blaze inside Kaguya. Her face tightens with deadly resolve as she grinds her teeth, swearing she'll make them pay for every single comrade they've lost. Her father kept talking, pacing inside a hangar packed with towering mechs, and mapped out the operation's first strike, snatching a transport of KOGs for the Asgard Empire. He said this wasn't just a robbery, it was a loud flex, the kind that would put them on equal footing when they went to bargain with Chubu. He hammered home just how huge the Mets would be, and told Kaguya she had to get way more skilled at piloting them before the operation kicked off. Then her face shifted into deep thought as she weighed it, and she answered that, just recently, she'd met someone really interesting. Her mind drifted to that young man with spiky black hair, another Yamato native, whose power was downright unreal. Her father's name sparked her excitement. She spoke with total confidence that inside Amaterasu, nobody could beat him. Isshin couldn't resist. He leaned in and demanded to know what kind of guy he really was. Elsewhere, others were losing their minds over this kind of power too. Reina Sylphide even wondered if he could be stronger than she, the silverized princess, and the whole idea sounded almost impossible. Even the top brass felt the same way. Sieg Sylphide told Lord Asgard that monsters of power don't just pop up at the turning points of history, and Lord Asgard nodded right along, agreeing that Yamato gaining its own prodigy right now felt way too perfect to be coincidence. Back in the Resistance hideout, Kaguya finally snapped back with an answer to her father's question, and the moment her mind replayed her run-in with that young man, a shy blush flared across her cheeks as she started to say, "He was kind." Her father clocked the red creeping up her face right away and pressed her about it, so Kaguya snapped in panic, her blush going even deeper as she shouted, "It's nothing at all." He just stared back with that knowing look, clearly buying her answer like he'd expected it. She perches on the edge of her bed, holding her breath as her father Ishin weighs every word she said. He folds his arms and tells her, if this warrior is really as strong as she swears, he wants to bring him in as an ally. She doesn't argue, she just lets him know the choice is his to make. He hesitates, eyes full of thought, and she can't help but ask what's haunting him. He stumbles over his words for a second before one private thought slips through, because she's basically her mother all over, even if he quietly wishes she'd inherited a few other things too. Her whole attitude snaps in an instant. She springs up, menacing energy blazing off her, towers over him, and demands he spill exactly what he's thinking while her father jerks back, his face locked in pure, shaking terror. After she takes care of her father, she shuts down the whole conversation and says, jokes aside, I need to judge what kind of man this warrior really is. Meanwhile, Ishin's got a fresh lump on his head, and he meekly asks if she thinks he's a sleazy old man. She stares into her cup, face unreadable, then her father leans in and demands to know if she really thinks she can trust this guy. She nods and says her intuition can be relied on just as much as she relies on him. Then her father wastes no time, he barks a clear command, bring him here. Meanwhile, in some quiet room far away, Kenya Mitsurugi, the whole reason they're even talking, lies sprawled across his bed. He isn't asleep, he's just glaring at the ceiling like it's staring back, and a heavy sigh rips out of him as the truth hits. He's bone-tired because everything that could have happened all at once. His mind drifts, replaying the wild, unreal stuff that just happened, silverized princesses, a night of grace blazing with power, and Kaguya's fiery fury snapping through his thoughts as it finally clicks. He's really been thrown into the world of KOGs. He'd already seen the world of *** Night of the Giant ** through the game, but then it hit him, knowing the story wasn't the same as fighting your way through it. Or Kaguya, who else is caught in this mess? This world is pure brutality, built on real conflict, real pain, and non-stop struggle. Running KOGS wasn't like pushing buttons in a game. This was the real deal, and every fight could decide who lived and who didn't. He replayed the game's original storyline in his head. Back then, he'd never helped Kaguya or Riene, but the main plot still barreled forward anyway, so now he knew he had to steer clear of anything that could twist the future into something wild and unpredictable. As the world kept rolling forward, he sprawled in bed with his phone clenched tight, staring at Kaguya's message, and decided, no more waiting. He had to step up and go all in with both Kaguya and Riene. His goal was crystal clear, rip the grim future out of the timeline before it could lock in and happen. But changing their fates wasn't the only reason he stepped in. He could already see where the story would crash next if nothing changed. A world-shaking event, a brutal war waged by the Emperor of the Asgard Empire, and death piled up in the thousands. And the idea of that looming world domination made him desperately try not to even look at it. He could already feel what waited at the end of that road, disaster on the horizon, and a world war breaking loose like it couldn't be stopped. Under the scorching shower, Kenya Mitsurugi stands with his arms crossed, staring into the water like it's got answers, hot streams carving down his face and chest as he sinks into deep thought. His eyes narrow to a razor point, and he decides, right here, right now, to map the whole mess step by step and untangle the trap he's fallen into. These thoughts instantly snap me back to the two women at the heart of it all, starting with Riene Sylphi. He weighs her status, Sieg Sylphid's daughter, famous across the whole empire as the strongest knight alive. Then his focus snaps to the other power player, Akagami Kaguya, a member of Amaterasu and the Yamato Liberation Alliance, openly rebelling against the empire. Right then, Kaguya clenches through the pain as her hair gets messed up again, and she refuses to bail on the alliance, no matter how brutal training gets. Her resolve is ironclad. She's sure she'll never feel truly happy unless she pulls off retaking Yamato. From the very beginning, they were built to clash, because every time you reach in to save one, fate slams the other into doom. Back in his room, Kenya stares at the drying mess on his head, and the weight of everything hits him. Can he really juggle two razor-thin targets at once, climbing the ranks in the empire and making sure the resistance actually gets something out of it? He dried his hair, and that same old saying echoed in his head, chase two rabbits and you'll get neither. Still, the thought wouldn't let him breathe. Doubt hardened into steel, pure defiance. He saw Riene and Kaguya in his mind, picturing them backing him up, and if it meant saving them both, he'd burn the world down to do it. He wasn't going to half-chase, he had to go all the way, because the only shot at getting both of us was to keep pushing until he won. Like his thoughts were pulling the strings, his phone suddenly chimed, Riene Sylphid's message. She wanted him to meet her in front of the simulation chamber at 7 the next morning, and hope hit him so hard his face broke into a nervous, thrilled smile. That initial rush of excitement crashed into doubt fast. Maybe she'd sent the message to the wrong person, until he caught her sharp, businesslike tone and knew it was absolutely her. Next morning, the clock clawed its way past 7:06, and Renee stood there with her arms crossed, glaring like a judge. The moment Sort finally showed up, she snapped that he was 6 minutes late. She snapped that her mornings were running out fast, and if he showed up late again, she'd have him fix it, starting with his sleep. Sor, utterly drained, could only nod and squint into the blinding light, thinking, she plays it cold, but that hunger for a fight. That's pure battle, maniac. He apologized, saying he'd been so buried in researching this world that he didn't sleep a wink, and when Renee caught that messy, haggard look, so unlike the day before, she wondered if his skill had been nothing more than luck, but deep down, she had to admit the contrast was exactly what made him so irresistible. So she stopped spiraling about the future and stayed locked on the moment, determined to uncover the truth of what he could really do. Then she demanded one promise. Every time they trained together, he had to go all in with everything he had. She's visibly flustered when he smirks at her and tells her not to cry later. She blushes, shoots back at him, and snaps that he better not look down on her. His laugh spills out like he can't help it, and he tells her she's making way too much of it. There's nothing to worry about. She whirls away, still burning red, and snaps, asking if he finds something funny about her. He swears it wasn't intentional, says he just never saw that side of her before. Reina, though, is fighting for control, trying to steady herself as the words spill out. She tells herself she can't get swept up in his rhythm, because this has to be some kind of tactic, since she's completely falling apart every time she talks to him. She snaps back into her cold, stern mode, jabs a finger at him, and declares he's the loser while she's the challenger. Then he flashes a confident grin, clocks the fire burning in her eyes, and gets fired up right back. In the blink of an eye, a few brutal days tore by, nothing but non-stop, grinding training. The days streak by in a blur, morning practice, then lessons. During a run, instructor Alfred screams that piloting a KOG demands stamina, shouting that the sword is slipping behind. Later in the classroom, the sword is so wiped out he drops off at his desk, and Alfred's glare slices right through him. He's utterly wiped out, barely managing to sip from his water bottle, and when Kaguya steps in, she demands to know what crushed him so badly, calling him straight up pitiful, especially since he's usually a beast at piloting KOGs. All he can do is thank her, admitting he's got next to no stamina left. Kaguya keeps going, saying Reina's glares are turning vicious day by day, and telling him to just apologize already, while Sword, drenched in sweat in the distance, admits the mess is complicated because she's the one who told him to go all out. With a wild, triumphant grin, he replayed how he answered her demand. Then he floored his machine, maxing it out to rack up victory after victory in the simulator, crushing her again and again until all she could face was defeat. As the morning practice ended, Kaguya slid up to him and watched his memory slip away, then teased that he and Reina were suddenly getting along too well, so he stammered, cheeks burning, and asked if she was jealous. Right when their banter started to heat up, their instructor Alfred shouted that time was up and slammed the brakes on the whole training day, and wiped out. Sort snapped to attention and followed his command. Right before they left, Kaguya leaned in and told him tomorrow was a day off, but Renee suddenly slid between them and hijacked the moment, calling his sword Kenyakan first, then snapping back to the clearer Kenya. Her sudden appearance slammed the room into an uneasy silence, and Kaguya locked eyes with Renee, her stare screaming a question she couldn't voice. Renee brushed off Kaguya's silent question, said she had business with him first, then snapped at Kaguya, "Who are you?" And when Kaguya didn't flinch, she told Renee through the sword, "I'll say it plain, we already had your day off planned." What? The confrontation kicked off right away. Kaguya shot at Renee, sneering that a woman of the Empire shouldn't be this obsessed with some second-class loser. Renee snapped back that it was Kaguya's business, then demanded to know what she even was to him. Trapped in the mess between them, Sword could only stare at him, panicked. Kaguya leaned into the opening and fired off a blunt, unstoppable question. "Are you his girlfriend?" It blindsided Reina so hard that shock flashed across her face the moment her brain caught up. Haja whips her sword around, cheeks burning with rage, and snarls at him. Who in their right mind would date a pervert like that? Trembling under the blast, her blade stammers that he's nothing more than a normal person to her. Her accusation slams into Sword so hard he can't even think, completely lost as he wonders why she's aiming this at him. While Kaguya stumbles over every word, Renee tries to explain their relationship, but both of them keep hitting the same wall. The right words just won't come. He lifts both hands, begging for calm, and yeah, Reina makes sense, but Kaguya's sudden meltdown leaves him totally baffled. Then a memory snaps into place, and his stomach drops when he realizes he'd completely forgotten that old incident. His mediation attempt crashes instantly. Both women snap their focus to him and scream his name at the top of their lungs. Renee rips into him, furious, reminding him of his promise to fight her anytime. Kaguya fires back just as hard, declaring he wants to take her on a date. Trapped between their non-stop demands, Sword starts drenched in sweat panic. Cold dread crawls up his spine, one wrong move and everything collapses into disaster. That's when it hits him. This is what people call chaos. Panic detonates in his chest because he realizes Kaguya is setting their outing up like it's their death. Clinging to any shred of control he can grab, he shoots off a plan on the spot, then pitches it. The three of them spar right now, and whoever wins gets to choose what happens for the rest of the day. His proposal hangs there like a loaded bomb, and Kaguya and Rin snap their heads toward each other, holding their breath as a silent, tense standoff erupts while they measure every last one of his terms. After a beat, Rin shatters the silence and nods. She'll accept the deal as long as she gets her fight. Then Kaguya's cheeks flare with a shy blush, and she gives in too, saying she's totally fine with it since this is the perfect chance to sharpen her skills. Sword thrusts a triumphant fist into the air, shouting with relief that he made it through that brutal face-off. As the three-way spar agreement is locked in, Alfred watches, nodding hard, because it's official now, the decision is final. His relief lasts half a heartbeat, then two sets of hands clamp down on him from behind, yanking him backward like they own him. He's suddenly trapped between a raging Kaguya and an equally furious Rin, and both of them tear into him at once, shouting, demanding to know exactly who he's backing and what side he's picking. His breath catches as he thrashes in their iron grip, sweat pouring while he realizes he and them are basically soldiers, and escape is dead on arrival. Just a few steps away, Alfred watches the whole thing, and a fresh plan starts brewing in his head. A moment later, the trio strides down a cold, sterile corridor, and Kaguya grabs Rin's hand to thank her for tagging along, because their instructor is clearly furious about the request, acting like they're nothing but second-class students. She admits the discrimination is official national policy, but she can't shake the feeling that it's gone too far lately, and then Kaguya drops the truth. She and Sword would never have gotten permission to use that facility on their own. Kaguya then leans in and asks Rin straight up if she minds being treated like second-classers, and Rin answers without sugarcoating that she doesn't. She's never once seen them as inferior. Kaguya lets that land, even as she quietly wrestles with how absurd it is to think rebelling against the Emperor could ever be worth it. Reina finally reaches their destination, shuts the conversation down on the spot, and strides onto a platform next to a huge simulator. She whips around at the others and growls, "Enough talking, let's start." Pinya Mitsurugi lays down the rules for Kaguya with a cocky smirk, 3 hits, and the whole match ends. With the rules locked in, the simulation kicks off. On barren, jagged ground, 3 Knight of Giga units suddenly appear, braced for battle as the official's signal flashes. That first clash sparks a jaw-dropping twist. Kaguya, furious, demands if Rin is finally taking this seriously. Rin stays icy and flat out says she knew Kaguya's dual-wielding would hit hard. Meanwhile, Kenya watches it all unfold, realizing that even with everything he's got, today's level of competition is going to force him to go even further. In the combat simulator, a gold-armored knight unit, bulky, unbreakable, and glowing, stands ready to unleash its power under the virtual lights. As soon as the formidable machine hits the scene, 2 smaller, slick units rocket in, locking onto the toughest opponent first and striking to end it fast. From inside his cockpit, the pilot grips the sword, smirks, and convinces himself their attack is solid, until his colossal machine erupts in a massive blaze, and he laughs, saying they'll never land a hit with something that simple. The simulation finally shuts down and the clash of battle goes quiet. In the training room, Kaguya and Rin are crumpled on the floor, winded, as his sword hovers over them. Then he grins and calls it, ending the session for the day. Rin loads her face with disapproval as she praises Kaguya for actually managing to tag him, then immediately challenges his plan. How is just running away supposed to win? Haja pivots away, grumbling as he reluctantly thanks Rin for helping, while Sword snaps back that his tactics won't be questioned. Rules are rules. Rin finally relents, saying she'll stop for the day and admitting it was good practice, but her tone screams she's far from satisfied. Kaguya lashes out, yanks Sword by the collar, and can't stop hiccuping with raw frustration, because the second she taunted him, he just charged in like a beast. Rin coolly even snaps that beating him won't help her practice one bit. Then Rin's face eased into something gentler. She even lets out a rare compliment, admitting that the one hit Kaguya actually landed that day wasn't half bad. That unexpected praise freezes Kaguya and Sword in stunned silence. Caught off guard by the praise, Kaguya blurts out a quiet thank you, cheeks burning. Sword watches her and grins to himself, thinking, all that effort was worth it if it just helped me get along with her a little more. He strides up to Kaguya, slips an arm around her shoulder, and practically pushes her along, telling her to come with him cheerfully. When she demands where they're going, he grins, a date, of course. Right nearby, Rin snorts that if Kaguya could always act like this, she'd make a decent warm-up, and that comment instantly spikes Kaguya's temper all over again. It drags her back to the moment she signed off on it herself, and then, boom, she remembers when he asked if she was a cat. Kaguya's face detonates into a furious blush, and before she can even breathe, fake cat ears pop up on her head as she stammers out, mortified, whether she really did meow. He ignores her protests and flashes a cheerful goodbye to Riene, thanking her for everything that happened today. Kaguya insists she's not done with her yet, but Riene just stands there and watches them disappear. She's left standing alone in the now empty hallway as their voices fade into the distance, and a sick twist hits her, hands to her chest, wondering why it suddenly aches like that. Her thoughts get ripped away when Alfred suddenly pops up right behind her, asks if she's maybe coming down with a cold, then blurts that he has to return a card, before trailing off into a thought that he should probably report what he found about the irregular. Meanwhile, Kaguya drifts through the crowded street, still drowning in embarrassment, muttering about that cat disaster, until Sword snaps her out of it, calling her name. Finally, she stops and the truth hits hard. The date was nothing but a smokescreen. Then he cuts straight to it, asking what she really wants to talk about, and her surprise is instant and total. Rage simmered in his chest as he scolded himself for blowing it, thinking he could have just asked her out like a normal guy, but that all-important talk still had to happen. As he spiraled, Kaguya suddenly cut in and, to his shock, said she wouldn't mind going on a date. He laid out the whole mess, because living in the dorms meant bringing a girl home would blow up everything, so Kaguya nodded and admitted their talk was way too sensitive for the open air. Cheeks blazing, she clutched her chest and blurted out what they were supposed to do next. For a heartbeat she froze, cheeks flushing hard, then she looked aside and blurted out a plan. She shyly asked why he didn't just come straight to her place. Her bold invitation instantly crashed into a flustered, rage-hot threat. She told him she'd kill him if he tried anything weird, then snapped back with what weird even meant, and somehow left him sweating like crazy. As they walked, he suddenly snapped to it. Somehow they'd sprinted from the KOG spar straight into this mess without lunch, and Kaguya clearly clocked it too, lifting a little fist like, "Yep, this is happening." He just said, "All right," and went along with the silent choice to grab food. Then Kaguya shot him a sharp, questioning look like she couldn't believe he agreed that fast. In what looked like her kitchen, they dumped the grocery bags onto the counter, and he blinked in shock she could actually cook. Kaguya tried to talk her way out of it, stammering that her skills were just average. She practically jumped in to help with everything, chopping veggies, anything at all, then boldly swore she could at least cook rice, but he brushed her off with a gentle smile and told Kaguya to just go rest. With a cheeky wink, he tells me to go take a shower, or whatever, while he starts cooking the meal. He smugly congratulates himself on his courage, convinced she's still sweaty from PE, and then Kaguya just stays quiet, totally unimpressed. Their kitchen run turns into full-on chaos. Sword screams at Kaguya to watch herself, raging that her cutting method is all wrong, while he insists larger pieces are totally fine, except he can't stand big chunks of potato. Kaguya, knife held up with a sharp glint in her eyes, fires back by threatening to slice his tongue right off along with the vegetables. Even with their endless bickering, he finally stomps through and announces the curry's done, then thrusts out a steaming plate like a victory trophy. As they take their seats to eat, he clasps his hands and thanks the meal, and Kaguya just stares at her plate, clearly impressed. He prays it hits her taste, and she answers with a simple thank you. She echoes his words, cheeks tinted, eyes thoughtful as she gets ready to eat, and before he can blink, he clocks the shift in her mood, so he asks what's wrong. But she won't meet his gaze, just looks away, and the word itadakamasu suddenly sticks in his head like a ghost, because he realizes it's been ages since he last heard it. After one bite, Kaguya reluctantly admits the food is actually great, yet you can practically hear her frustration spike in the air. When Sword hears her praise, he takes a sip, panics a little, and blurts out that she's pretty good herself. The fun mood evaporates. He slams his glass down, his smile gone, and says her name like it matters. Then he hits her with the question he's been holding in. Why is she the night school? She pauses for a beat, swirls her curry like it's buying time, then finally blurts out the reason, because of her goal. He pushes harder, demanding to know if she's talking about fighting the Empire, and when she won't say a word, he slams his hands onto the table and tells her it's okay. He leans in with iron conviction, hand pressed to his heart as he vows he's on her side, and when her eyes widen in shock, he doubles down, telling her he's not lying. His sincerity finally breaks through. She drops her gaze and whispers his name, Kenya, and right then a brutal memory crashes in. Her younger self, torn apart, staring in horror as she realizes one move would have ended her life. She pushes herself up from the table and snaps that her mission is real revenge, against the people who stole what mattered most to them. Then she points to a framed photo on the shelf and says there's more behind it, because in that picture she's standing with her father and another young man. She stares at the folder, voice blazing with resolve, and vows she won't stop until she gets back the one place meant for everyone. Then the mystery drops. Our Yamato finally learns the name of that place. 5 years ago, right after Yamato got occupied, the whole city looked like a battlefield aftermath. Buildings crumbled into skeletons, and the empty sky hung over it all like a cruel reminder of the war that had just ended. The land lay ravaged, whole stretches turned into dead zones, and everyone cowered from those rampaging, lawless imperial soldiers. So the people of Yamato vanished into hiding, surviving on the very edges of what used to be their homes. A small crew of survivors scrambled up a cold set of stone steps, and whispers of terror tore through the group. People were getting kidnapped, weren't they? While one stubborn voice swore it was the imperial soldiers behind it. Strutting ahead of everyone were the young Kaguya and a young man, and when he noticed her, he turned with a warm smile, asking if her bag was too heavy so he could help. He introduced himself as Jin Akagami, Kaguya's older brother, and said their dad had slipped out to hunt for food, then leaned in asking what they should do while he was gone. But Kaguya turned bright red and snapped that she could carry her own things because she was already 10. Right then, Kaguya's stomach growled like thunder, and mortified, she flung her arms out and yelled that it wasn't what he thought, while Jean barged in laughing, teasing her that she didn't have to hide it. He kept needling her, laughing that her tiny appetite was the reason she wasn't growing like she should. Then, right as she fumed, he dangled a piece of candy in front of her. Kaguya snapped back that she was on a diet for her growth phase, but Jean just grinned and shoved the sweet straight into her mouth anyway. He popped the candy in his mouth, grinned, and asked Kaguya if it actually tasted good. She blushed and nodded, admitting it did. Jean's smile flickered with the truth. Life hits hard, but his family makes it livable. Then he gently ruffled her hair, shooting her an apologetic look for teasing her. He softly cupped his younger sister's head and vowed that as long as they stood by each other, she'd never go hungry. Then Kaguya's eyes spilled with tears as she met his gaze, silently agreeing with everything they'd survived together. He truly still believed the good days would come back, but he snapped that waiting on their father was pointless and urged them to go hunt food themselves. Kaguya's mood shot up. She thanked him, then ran ahead, and just as she did, a voice from nowhere boomed, "Found you." What? Right then their world snapped into a living nightmare. Two men burst in, one with wild, pale hair and a sick grin, the other hiding behind dark strands. Kaguya froze in pure terror as the wild-haired monster lunged straight at her, and she ripped out a desperate scream for her brother. Jean shot forward to shield her, instantly clocking these guys as kidnappers. Then the wild-haired one snapped back with a deranged grin, bragging that they wouldn't want his cute little sister dying, and that they were hunting young women from Yamato. Before he could even react, the wild-haired man lunged from behind and clamped a blade to his throat. The dark-haired accomplice just stood there, stone-faced, while Jean was pinned down, eyes bulging with pure shock and helpless terror. Trapped, he could only shriek Kaga's name, while she froze in terror, watching her brother fight for air as the kidnapper clamped onto him. The dark-haired man stepped forward, cool as ice, and told his partner he didn't need him for this. Then, in a split second, he drove a blade straight into Jin's side. With a brutal goodbye, the man snapped his weapon back. Jin crumpled to the ground as blood rushed outward, and Kaguya just froze, staring in total shock, words trapped in her throat while her mind refused to process the nightmare as her brother lay still. She shakes her fallen brother with desperate fury, her voice shattering as she screams his name, begging him to rise, while her cries bounce off the empty alley and denial claws at her like a nightmare she can't accept. Her screams get ripped out mid-plea as a kidnapper snatches her from behind, wild hair flying, knife flashing in his hand with a cruel grin like he's about to taste her, while his partner barks at him to hurry, warning that her noise will bring the whole world down on them. She yanks at her clothes, frantic, while his face twists into a wild, maniac grin as he swears he'll test the poison first, then hand her over to the nobles. With a brutal, sick laugh, he boasts that ruining women from defeated countries is the greatest thrill, and the poor girl freezes solid, drowning in pure terror. Looming over her, he murmurs that what he's about to do would be a crime back home, but here, he can chase his desires with zero consequences, especially with a girl her age. Suddenly, the other kidnapper chokes on a gasp, pure shock as a blade drives into his back, and behind him, bloodied but still standing, is Jean. The wild-haired man whirls around, screaming in shock at the boy he swore was gone, while Jean plants his feet, eyes blazing with fresh, unshakable resolve. He glares at the last attacker, voice low and unshaking as he tells him not to mess with the people of Yamato. Then the wild-haired man snaps, rage exploding as his partner goes down, hurling insults and screaming at the defiant boy. He shrugs off the insults, steps right between the danger and his sister, and throws his arms wide like a final shield. He stands his ground, blood pouring from his wound and soaking the cracked earth, and as pain hits him, he clings to the promise he made to his mother, while behind him, his sister Kaguya drops to her knees, calling his name with a voice that breaks. His face is carved from pure resolve, and he swears he'll protect her, no matter what it costs him. The last kidnapper's rage flares. He levels his pistol and snarls at Jean, telling him to know his place, while Kaguya trembles, begging him to stop. He yells that because they rebelled against an imperial soldier, nobody will dare complain about what comes next, right as he pulls the trigger, and some figure streaks past him in the blink of an eye. The man grabs his own throat and rips it open, then blood blasts out in a violent rush. When the second kidnapper collapses, Akagami Ishin towers over him with a blade still in his grip. He came barreling in after hearing the gunshots, shouting for his kids, and Kaguya blurts out her brother's name as soon as she sees their father has finally arrived. He rushes to his son's side, but it's already too late. Kaguya cradles her brother and begs her father, screaming that Jean is dying. In his final breaths, Jean lifts his eyes, apologizes, and admits he feels like he failed. As the sun sags, Ishin's head whips to the side, then he hears it. Something moving nearby, and in that instant he realizes they've been spotted, spitting out, "We're found." He snatched up his injured son, Jean, and practically shoved them into escape, yelling for them to get out right now, and when Kaguya's voice shook with fear, she nodded fast and threw her arm around her brother to keep him moving. They bolted down a long, sterile corridor, Jin's blood splashing a trail behind them, and the pursuers' voices kept booming closer, proving they were tracking that exact mess. Kaguya whipped her head back, terror carved into her face as... With his son cradled in his arms, Ishin heard Jean's voice crack as he called weakly, teeth clenched through raw pain, and Ishin swore, right there, that he'd protect them both no matter what. His son jerked himself away out of nowhere, and it made Jean jump hard, blood still smeared on his lips, but Jean swore up and down he was fine. He then whipped out a tiny device from his clenched fist, and Ishin's eyes went wide with shock as he blurted out, asking what his own son was holding. The three of them froze in that hallway. Jean admitted he couldn't push forward, and his father nodded, knowing the grim necessity of it all. Then Kaguya felt everything change and snapped her brother's name in it. Ishin begged him to stop, shouting that his plan was sheer madness, but Jin didn't budge 1 inch. He pressed the weight of Yamato's duty into his father's mind, making it clear he couldn't let him die here. Hagia let out a desperate cry, refusing to leave her brother behind, but Jin's will was ironclad, because he couldn't stomach the idea of his sister ending up in the clutches of those bastards. He cradles his sister Kaguya as she looks up at him in tearful shock. Blood slips from his lips, and his face twists with raw pain and grim certainty. He cups her cheek in his hand, murmurs her name with a tender voice, and then rushes in with a sincere apology for scaring her. He keeps sharpening his grim prophecy, telling her the suffering won't stop, even when part of her starts begging for death, then demands she promise him something. Leaning in, he hammers his request into the air. She has to never, ever quit, because nothing matters more than staying alive. Then his focus snaps to his father, Ishin. He makes it crystal clear their survival matters for one brutal reason. They have to take Yamato back. He leans in and begs his father to promise him they'll do it. Grief crushes Ishin so hard all he can scrape out is a strangled apology, until Jean slams the moment shut, roaring at him to grab Kaguya and get out of there, and as Ishin and Kaguya turn to flee, Jin's voice rings after them, telling his father he's always been proud of him. Ishin's face twists with pure anguish as he makes his vow. Then, hearing it, a weak, final smile flickers onto Jin's lips before he declares, loud and certain, that he'll be the one to bring Yamato back. With that promise on the line, Ishin yanks Kaguya forward. She shrieks as her father clamps down, begging him not to rip her away from her brother. She thrashes, sobbing, calling for Jean, but he's already turning his back, vanishing down the long corridor, and the sight of his retreat becomes a memory that will burn in her forever. She remembers it like it happened yesterday, yanked out of the chaos, terror blazing across her face as she clutched her father tight while rubble swallowed everything. Hot tears streamed from her eyes, catching the fiery glow of her brother's sacrifice, because it was on the day she lost him that she finally hardened her resolve. Since she swore revenge on the empire that stole everything in the present, she finally shuts the gap and finishes her tale to Kenya, telling her she's been carrying her brother's wish to take Yamato back for everyone. She shoots him a grateful look for listening, then her face hardens as she vows her hunger to fight won't ever fade, and tells him that's exactly why she threw herself into the resistance. He takes in her words, stunned like, wait, is this really happening? She nods and admits she came to this world for one reason, to stay by his side and protect him. And once he hears that, he doesn't hesitate. He's choosing one path. He's joining the resistance too. Confidence rockets through him as he blurts, "It'll be fine, I'm the strongest." Then Kaguya watches in silence, her warning hanging heavy. His life is on the line, and he'll have to start killing people. He snaps his playful smile away and turns to her, admitting the danger head-on, then insists it's still the best move, because letting her die outright isn't an option. He locks eyes with Kaguya, resolve hardening like steel as their new alliance clicks into place in his head. She meets his stare, caught off guard, but still holding that flicker of shock. A burst of confidence surges through him as he clenches his fist and vows that everything is going exactly as planned. Then Kaguya gives a soft, grateful nod, admitting she actually expected him to say yes. Just as he sat down to the meal she prepared, a brutal wave of sleepiness hit him out of nowhere. His plan to be her ally was all he could think of before his vision went fuzzy, and he noticed the bowl in front of him was suddenly empty. She watches him stumble, smugly certain the drug is doing its job, then raises a tiny vial and tells herself, plain as day, that it's just a simple sleeping pill. He fights the creeping darkness, dread crashing over him, and he mutters that he wants to trust her, yet some part of him still refuses, like his soul is bracing for impact, right before his body finally gives out. With a quiet thud, he faceplants onto the floor and passes out, and Kaguya stares down at him like, so this is how I earn affection points I still don't have enough of. Soon enough, two uniformed men haul his limp body away, and Kaguya just watches them disappear, jaw clenched, because now that he's in on the resistance, there's no turning back for him. In the thick silence, she finally chokes out a soft, regret-filled apology, speaking his real name like it hurts. Sorry, Kenya. A lone bare light bulb swings back and forth, blasting a cold, ruthless glare into the dark void. Underneath it all, his sword lets out a strained groan as consciousness crawls back in, and his eyes struggle to finally snap into focus. He stumbles into a crumbling, dust-choked room and finds himself strapped to a battered wooden chair, dazed and spinning. Then he blurts, "Where am I?" One quick look down seals it. His worst fears are real. Heavy metal restraints clamp his legs too. He yanks and struggles, and panic hits like a punch as he realizes he's never getting out of these bonds. His thoughts explode as he tries to snap together the pieces, curry with Kaguya, then that crushing wave of sleepiness, and when her words about a drug comes back, dread slams into him like a truck. She betrayed him. His wild, racing thoughts get ripped apart by a man's voice. The back-turned figure says he didn't want to be so rough, but the situation left him no choice, and Sword jerks his head up, shocked at the sudden presence. The man whips around, and the Sword instantly recognizes that stern, rugged face, Akagami Ishin, Kaguya's father. Then he drops into a seat across from the captive boy, with a pistol looming on the table beside him. Ishin lines in, eyes blazing as he finally addresses his prisoner by his full name. "Nice to meet you, Mitsurugi Kenyakuan." In this bleak industrial room, Akagami Ishin sits across from Kenya Mitsurugi and tells him he's heard how carefully he's been looking after Kaguya at school, then thanks him, straight from the heart. Mitsurugi just freezes, caught off guard by how formal it all feels. Then he dips his head low, his voice trembling with real sincerity as he gives a simple, heartfelt thank you. A strange mix sends Mitsurugi into full panic. He snaps the older man's head up, swearing he only did what anyone would do, even as relief surges through him, and he quietly decides their first impression landed right, then pushes them onward to the real topic. Leaf's time is short, then, in an instant, Ishin's whole vibe snaps. His face twists with razor-sharp suspicion as he barges forward and demands to know exactly what Mitsurugi is. The kid, with a little blood leaking from his lip, freezes, hit hard by that intense, suspicious stare. Meanwhile, at the Akagami family home, Kaguya and her brother Jean race up to the entrance. They walk and Jean clocks it, his sister's worried face is back. He snaps, asking what's wrong because she's been cold ever since they got home. Kaguya brushes it off, but admits she's uneasy because it was her who brought Mitsurugi to their place. Mitsurugi deepens, can't stop worrying, and she blurts out that the idiot better be okay, right when the door swings open and their father steps in, tells Kaguya to hold tight, and says he's going to have a talk with that boy. His words linger as the scene snaps back to the interrogation. Then Ishin lifts a file with a razor stare, telling Mitsurugi that Kaguya might be fooled by the act, but he sure wasn't, so he went and checked it himself. He slammed the file onto the table, yanking everyone's attention as its contents spilled out. Then he pointed out the truth. Mitsurugi's past was totally empty. Not a single scrap of info existed about him before he enrolled in the school. That revelation punched panic straight into Mitsurugi's chest. He hadn't even bothered to think about his background settings, convinced the system would just build them for him. But Ishin went cold, whispering that someone might have deliberately wiped those records clean. His eyes stayed locked on the young man as the room's surveillance fed him more reasons to doubt, and he finally blurted out that Mitsurugi might be an Empire spy, then demanded a chat to find out exactly who he really was. Panic exploded in Mitsurugi's chest. This was bad, real bad, and he blurted out whatever he could, anything at all, just to talk his way out. His mind sprinted in circles, but nothing made sense. No plausible answer showed up. He knew Ishin would never buy the truth, that he came from another world, As he wrestled for words, Ishin's patience snapped, pushing him to explain why he couldn't just say it. Before Ishin could even stammer out a word, he lunged in, slammed a device to Ishin's arm, and drove an unknown substance straight into him. Mitsurugi let out a gasp, shouting in shock, "What did you just do to me?" While Ishin stayed cool and stepped back, admitting he'd just slipped him a truth serum. Strange patterns crawled across the young man's skin, and Ishin's face stayed stone cold as he snapped that this was a battle to reclaim their country, so they wouldn't hold back, not even for a child. As the drugs hit, he slammed the interrogation, yanking the young man's real name, where he was from, and how he even found out about the resistance. Mitsurugi's head pulsed with brutal pain, but through the fog he forced out, Kenya Mitsurugi, Tokyo, and a broken, dawning truth snapped into place. He'd known about the resistance for a long time. Mitsurugi's questions snapped from one thing to the next, then turned to family like, who's involved? With his head bowed, he mumbled that he had nobody he could call family, and that answer hit us like a sudden punch to the gut. Then he snapped his gaze up, pain flooding his eyes as he finally admitted why he vanished. He'd been left behind. The confession got ripped apart as the interrogation room door flew open with a violent kick, and a voice from the hall screamed a warning, yet Ishin shoved through the chaos, snarling at his captive and demanding the real mission. Kaguya burst in, her face twisted in pure fury, and she stormed straight up to her father, demanding to know why he was using drugs on Mitsurugi. Then Ishin snapped, calling her by name, and ordered her to back off and stay out of it. She refused to yield, insisting that sure, Mitsurugi had weird tech, but that didn't make him a spy, and maybe he even deserved her approval. Her father stayed rock solid, saying reclaiming Yamato was his duty, so he couldn't gamble on trust so easily, even though he admitted he genuinely wanted to. Meanwhile, in another control room, 3 resistance members watched everything unfold, and the console operator made it brutally clear. Letting Mitsurugi step in wasn't just a decision, it was a gamble with every single life in Amaterasu hanging on the outcome. Back in the interrogation room, Ishin spun away from his daughter and stood rock steady, repeating that they couldn't trust the newcomer so fast, and Kaguya's face tightened with worry, yet she looked like she got it. Then Ishin squared up to Mitsurugi again, ready to question him once more. He shoved his pistol straight into Kenya Mitsurugi's face, barked with iron certainty, and demanded to know his mission. Mitsurugi went pale and could only freeze, staring at the gun. His explanation sounded empty, like it came from far away. He blurted out that he'd been left behind, that he'd lost his footing in the world, and a cold flash of a barren, empty room swallowed his thoughts. His grief swallowed everything whole. He couldn't shake that brutal thought that nothing mattered anymore, trapped in torment because he couldn't save the people he loved, until the memories snapped back to a rain-soaked ledge in the dark where he'd stared at the end. But right when hope was slipping away, a fresh memory slammed into him, Kaguya and Rione's faces, battered yet breathing. Through tears, he confessed they were the ones who hauled him back when he hit rock bottom. That deep gratitude lit a fire under his resolve, and his eyes burned as he swore these weren't just words. They were his real feelings, the reason he begged to join Amaterasu. Ishin listened, his face tightening just a little. That raw honesty in the young man's voice shattered Ishin's control. Tears poured down his face as he shouted that the resistance had saved the country. Yet he still couldn't stop thinking about Mitsurugi and the others, the ones he desperately wished he could have repaid. Meanwhile, in an observation room, Kaguya sat with a young man in a bandana and watched the interrogation, calm as ever, saying she already knew enough. Meanwhile, in the other room, Mitsurugi suddenly felt it. He realized the drug they gave him was only a mild anesthetic, and the numbness was wearing off fast. Her companions traded thoughts, and the operator with the glasses admitted the plan ran flawless, until they hit the halfway mark. The spiky-haired youth didn't blink, the blonde woman shrugged because they finally got the intel they needed, and the bandana-wearing kid fumed after realizing they'd been played, snapping that Ishin was never any good at deception like this. Once the test wrapped up, Akagami dropped to his knees, bowing hard to Kenya Mitsurugi, and confessed that he'd deceived everyone, but it was the only way to get the group to agree. Mitsurugi told him to lift his head, grateful and fully understanding that the trial had to happen. Then he straightens up, raises his gloved hand, and greets Kenyakuin like it's a ceremony. So Mitsurugi looks up, and a flicker of shock crosses his face as he clicks what's happening. He grabs the offered hand and clamps down hard, and Mitsurugi shoots back that he'll take care of him, calling him father. Ishin tightens his grip even more, insisting it's still way too soon for a title like that. That mission drags Mitsurugi straight into a sprawling settlement, a scrappy tent city of makeshift shacks, where people carry on like it's just another day, right in the middle of all that chaos. As they head down the road, Ishin lays it out. This is what suburb life truly looks like, a brutal contrast to the Empire's crowded cities, and he admits that even after 5 long years, huge stretches of land still haven't come under the Empire's grip. He breaks it down, saying these aren't random outsiders. They're Yamato folks who got shut out of the Empire's system, so they've been forced to hide away in secret communities like this one. Their road cuts away from the settlement and heads straight for a giant, plain warehouse, and Mitsurugi can't help but ask where they're going, while Ishin just smirks and says there's something important he's dying to show them. He marches him into total darkness, and when Mitsurugi complains he can't see a thing, Ishin just smirks and tells him to wait. Then boom, a blazing light ignites and Mitsurugi is caught completely off guard. Mitsurugi just froze, staring at the two giant machines in front of him, eyes bulging. Akagami Ishin said one was an imperial, mass-produced KOG Ikez, the only one they had running right now, and that hit like lightning because Mitsurugi's excitement exploded. This was a real KOG. He demanded to know why they were dragging out something like that, and Ishin answered by saying he'd ask Mitsurugi for backup in the plan for tomorrow. Then he thrust the startup key into his hands, shouting that it was time for Mitsurugi to pilot a real KOG, not some simulator, and the second Ishin moved the machine, its systems roared to life. Ishin's mind lit up with old battle memories, mechanized knights smashing together in a violent blur, their metal and energy streaking past too fast to follow. He weighed Kaguya's words in his mind, wondering if she was dead on, and if this young guy from Yamato really was a genius, the kind who could change everything. Right then, Kaguya burst in and shouted for her father, asking how long he planned to camp there, and warning him not to crank up that huge machine too loudly. Her eyes snapped to Mitsurugi, clocking his fresh change of clothes, and she asked if the sizes were right. Ishin looked flustered, scratched the back of his head, and blurted out a shaky, sheepish apology. He thanked her for her consideration, and Kaguya flicked her gaze away, brushing off his gratitude like it was nothing more than what she had to do. Suddenly a pack of young kids came sprinting up to them, shouting her name, Kagane, and when she saw them, her face hardened and she snapped at them, asking why they'd shown up after she told them clearly to stay away. Kenya clocks her flustered face the second she walks in, calling out how restless she's been ever since she returned. Then he leans in, asks if she was worried about him, and she snaps back immediately, denying it with shaking force. Right as she stammers for words, a small girl grabs her jacket and demands to know, "So who is this new person?" He drops to a knee, introduces himself as Mitsurugi Kenya, and says he's Kaguya's classmate, while the young boys huddle and whisper, one claiming Kuga brought a man home, another grumbling that she's got a real difficult personality. That last comment gets overheard and Kaguya's face snaps with fury as she demands, "Who are you calling difficult?" The kids go wide-eyed and bolt, Kenya getting stuck in the middle as he yells at them to run. Right after, Kaguya storms to her father, Ishin, raging about where they even picked up that kind of talk. Ishin just smirks and teases that it's way too soon to be introducing a man to him, sending Kaguya into full exasperation. After the wild start, everything settles into a cozy, family-style vibe fast. Kenya, Kaguya, her father, and all the kids crowd around a lively meal together, laughing and trading jokes. When dinner's over, Kenya gets swept up in their warmth and joy, chasing games and running wild with the children. By the end of the day, the celebration spills right into a giant bath, where Kenya even jumps in to help wash one of the younger kids' hair. As night slips in, the wild excitement of the day finally fades into a calm hush. While in a giant room, rows of fountains lie on the floor and every kid, along with Kenya, is out cold and sleeping soundly. He shoots upright in the dark, staring at the sleeping silhouettes around him, and murmurs to himself how fast everyone conked out after all that running around. His quiet thought doesn't last. Kaguya barrels in with an apology for dragging him into all this, and he whips around with a gentle smile, telling her it still caught him off guard, but he honestly doesn't mind. He admits it's been ages since he's felt this lively, and somehow the whole situation has made him genuinely happy. Hearing that, Kaguya's face eases, and she just offers a simple, heartfelt thank you. She stood by the window under the full moon, and when Kenya asked if she was always this busy, she snapped back that it was only like this while she was here. She strode into the sleeping quarters and laid it all out. Every single one of the kids was an orphan of the war with the Empire. She said this was the hardest age for them, the age where they still beg for attention, and she felt it in her bones that she had to step up and look after them as much as she could. Her eyes softened as she watched them, praying with all her heart that they'd grow up healthy, strong, and safe. He stared at her with a soft smile and told her she'd be an amazing mom someday, then immediately reminded her about the big operations lined up for tomorrow, so Kaguya blushed, snapped that he was talking nonsense, and shoved him towards sleep. After they traded goodnight wishes, the room went dead quiet. Kaguya and the kids were out like a light, but Kenya stayed awake, eyes wide in the dark. His thoughts got yanked aside when a tiny hand suddenly grabbed his right there in the dark. The little one beside him mumbled one word in her sleep, "Papa," and he snapped his gaze down, staring in pure, stunned disbelief. Her tiny grip clenched harder as she slept, still pleading, begging her father to not leave Azusa behind. those innocent words hit Kenya like a weight, and his face sank into a somber silence. Elsewhere in a blindingly bright port, a massive cargo ship was docked tight, its deck stacked with containers as towering cranes loomed over everything. At the designated port, a colossal transport ship squats at the dock, and with a thunderous metallic clang, a massive combat unit rolls off the ramp, its arrival blasting the clear signal that the operation is about to begin. On the ground, armed operatives snap into readiness, while hidden among the towering shipping containers, teams A, B, and C all report they're locked in and waiting for the signal. At the command center, Kenya locks onto the feeds and barks orders for everyone to stay razor-focused, while Akagami Ishin looms beside her, face set in stone, warning them how serious this mission really is, because if this operation works, it'll be a massive leap forward for Yamada. He settles into the cockpit of his own unit, eyes locked on what lies ahead, a bead of sweat sliding down his brow. Then he murmurs the mission like a command, Operation Hog Capture. With his objective carved in stone, he slams out the final command, begin. In a moonlit clearing, his powerful Knight of Grace unit awakens, its metallic frame humming with deadly readiness for the battle about to explode. Lord Asgard watches the KOG pilot, the War God, show up at the academy, and realizes the same thing goes for Sieg Sylphid too. Sieg grips a chess piece and snaps back that he still hasn't heard what Lord Asgard's doing here. Across from the prince at the chessboard, he breaks it down and admits his whole drive boils down to regret. Then Lord Asgard just listens, eyes narrowing, stunned by the answer. He lays it out clearly. He's hunting for the final piece, and Lord Asgard can't help it. He presses him, repeating the word piece with sharp, curious focus. This hunt kicks off because Lord Asgard's dad, the 99th Emperor Algard Asgard, is hanging by a thread, sick in bed for a whole year, and his son can feel it. The Emperor won't last much longer. The Emperor's health is slipping, and nobody's really talking about who takes over, so Lord Asgard sits with the situation and quietly names the real contenders: Princess Ymir Asgard, Prince Odin Asgard, and himself. And in that moment, he's sure it's those three who are closest to the throne right now. He clocks the political game like it's already checkmated, because Ymir backs his brother Odin, and now he's stuck dead last with the worst odds of surviving, cursing the fact that he doesn't have the pieces he needs to flip the whole board. This desperation yanks the conversation straight back to the here and now. Lord Asgard even claims it's exactly why a war genius like Sieg would end up at the academy, because he's hunting rough stones, students with raw potential he can shape, since no one who's already made the cut is standing out. He pauses for a heartbeat, then heads straight to Lord Asgard and demands, "So what's strength?" The prince answers without missing a beat, "Strength is believing in yourself," and Sieg just shrugs, knowing that's exactly the kind of answer he always gives. As Sieg Sylphid gripped that black king chess piece, he snapped that chasing your goal matters more than anything, even if it means you've got to reshape the world itself, and the way he stared said this was their final, game-winning move. The comm chat got ripped apart when a young operator stormed in mid-conversation, bellowing for General Sieg with an emergency report. Sieg snapped back, furious at the mess, and told him to at least knock the... The flustered operator kept yelling, now demanding Lord Asgard, and with a quick casual wave, Asgard tried to shut him down. Then C stepped in, correcting him that at the academy he was the principal, not some general, before Asgard calmly demanded the report. After a quick apology, the operator kicked off his report, C pushing him to carry on, and he said that, out of the aircraft slated to land that day, 10 KOG units had already been seized. The word hit the sea like a jolt and everyone froze. Then the operator snapped the truth into place. This wasn't just bad, it was way worse. Then the worst news hit: every single unit had been shot down, and the shock froze Sieg and Lord Asgard in stunned silence. Breaking the silence and turned it into a gut punch, see what happened to the KOG escort squad. The operator confirmed they were there, then crushed them with the truth. Every last one was wiped out by a single machine. Lord Asgard's face fell as rage and dread battled in his eyes, and he snapped whether this was some kind of joke, only for the operator to say, "I'll show you the visual data," and trail off. On screen, grim reality hit hard. Agile KOG units stormed in and split the enemy in half, their blades carving through the armored torso with ruthless, terrifying ease. The clip she watched showed a brutal mismatch. One massive, heavily armored KOG slammed its blade forward and just shrugged off the escort unit's strike. Without even slowing down, the giant machine slammed its fist straight into the escort unit's torso, crack, shattering its armor on impact. The smaller KOG got slammed backward by that brutal hit, sparks exploding everywhere as its systems started to die. In the blink of an eye, the escort unit got wiped out, its frame ripped apart by a merciless barrage. The footage kept rolling, and there it was again, KOG the monster crashing into yet another escort unit, smashing through them with the exact same brutal, overpowering force. It tore straight through the second unit's defenses and struck again, decisively. The second KOG got split in two, and just like the first, it vanished instantly, completely, with no fight left. As the screen buckled into static, the operator snapped that it was all the footage they had left. Sieg Sylphid stood there with arms crossed, staring in grim silence, while Lord Asgard sat at the chessboard and only managed a small, stunned sound of disbelief. With a data slate clutched to his chest, the operator swears the machine's power is at least on par with a holy knight. Yet Sieg Sylphid, face carved in grim tension, can't shake the fear that a pilot of that level could even exist inside Yamato's Colony 13. While he's still lost in thought, the light-haired student leans in and asks if the KOG could be some kind of special model. Sieg shuts that down fast, saying it's only a mass-produced Icaz. But Lord Asgard is staring at the screen like it's staring back, and he murmurs that he knows those moves. A broken memory snaps into his head, two shifting intentions, and a gaze that watches him from a silhouette he recognizes. He snaps back to the moment, shoots a hand up to grab his brother's attention, and his sudden move startles both Sieg and the light-haired student. A wide, knowing grin cracks across his face as the last puzzle piece snaps into place, and the truth hits him like a bolt. He already found exactly what they've been hunting. He calls the pilot a rough stone that somehow shines like a gem, and the operator snaps an apology, saying the report's already been delivered to the nation's top brass. Lord Asgard doesn't flinch. He declares he's got an idea and will take this into his own hands, insisting it'll be for the best. Later that night, somewhere else in town, the lights were blazing at a quiet residence. Inside, a whole crew lifts their glasses and cans high, cheering like it's a victory toast. In a cozy amberlit room, the Amaterasu crew crowds around tables piled high with food and drinks, toasting their win. Then Akagami Ishin steps up and declares that the success of their latest operation is huge for their cause, crediting everyone's hard work, and basically admitting that landing such a mountain of KOGs is a victory they can't afford to waste. Then he calls out the day's MVP and goes straight for Kenya Mitsurugi, praising him like he's the key to it all. Ishin even says plain and sure that without Kenya, they never would have pulled it off. Kenya just grins, clearly honored, but you can tell the spotlight makes him a little embarrassed. Kenya's comrades explode into agreement. One guy slaps an arm around his shoulders, raving that he's awesome and reminding everyone how he kept crushing the escort KOGs, while a woman with a cup chimes in that she watched the whole fight and it was her first time seeing a KOG pull off moves like that. That loudmouth keeps needling him, claiming the young Mrs. Chosen's boyfriend, Kaguya, was supposed to pull off a stunt like that, but Kaguya blushes hard and violently denies it, while Ishin admits that even though he'd been scared to hand the mission to an amateur at first, he's in now. Overwhelmed, Kenya shoots him a look, says he needs to use the bathroom. As he turns to leave, Kaguya fixes her eyes on him, and her smile fades into pure concern, like she can't believe he's just storming off. She tries to read what's going on, but he doesn't even glance back. He strides away and leaves her standing there. He slips away from the celebration, walking alone while his mind turns inward, replaying how, in the real fight he'd waited for, he proved his strength just like he did in the simulator, because the operation was a total win. They expected to snag just 2 or 3 machines, but they hauled in 10 from a massive cargo ship out at sea. Right in the middle of it all, his mind snaps to the present. Under the moonlight, he stands before a capture KOG, its chassis shredded by battle, and he can't help but murmur to himself that his very first operation was a massive win. He reaches out and lays a hand on the machine's cold, battered metal, and a heavy wave of melancholy crashes over him. He tells himself he should be grateful it ended without anyone getting lost, but his grim silence gives away the deep storm inside. His hands won't stop shaking. Last night's victory is already fading, replaced by the brutal sting of defeat, and that thought slams into his head like a broken scream. He lost. The memory hits and his body explodes into a violent reflex. Nausea surges up his throat as he staggers back, hands clamped over his mouth, choking on the stress. As he gasps for air and grips his chest, another memory crashes in, an aching voice telling him with heartbreaking certainty that he chose this path with his own hands, so why is it haunting him again right now? A worried voice slices through his chaos, demanding to know if he's really okay. He lifts his gaze and locks onto Akagami Ishin, Kaguya's father, his face set and tense as he plants a steady hand on the young man's shoulders, trying to keep him grounded. When Kenya's face went pale, Ishin shoved a bottle of water into his hands, and Kenya snatched it with instant gratitude. After a few quiet moments, they finally sit together. Ishin leans in and asks if he's calmed down, and Kenya, now looking way steadier, tells him he's good. Then he stares out at the moonlit clouds, chokes out an apology, and admits that even though he swore he was ready, deep down he can't shake the feeling that all his confidence might have just been empty talk. It bursts with relief and thanks everyone, and Akagami Ishin shuts down the apologies, saying Kenya already handled his job perfectly. The old man leans in and asks if that was Kenya's first real fight, and Kenya nods. Yeah, it was, because even though he could fly the KOG like he'd been taught, something still didn't click for him until right now. His mind snaps back to the fight in an instant, the vicious jolt as their swords collided with a thunderous clash. The memory rips on, an exploding enemy machine detonates with a massive shockwave that slams through everything. Right here, right now, his hands shake as the memory hits, everything feels crushingly heavy, and he insists it's nothing like the simulator, not even close. His face twists with pure panic as he blurts out that, in that moment, he was hanging by a thread, so desperate he didn't even think about his enemy dying. Akagami Ishin listens for a second, then lays it out plain. This is what a real fight is. Every single person is gambling with their life to chase their own goals and to stand for what they think is right. Kenya finally gets it too, nodding like, this isn't just on you, admitting he knows everyone out there is carrying their part, so he doesn't have to shoulder that weight alone. The older man fires a straight question at him. Now that he's tasted a real fight, will Kenya keep pushing or will he throw in the towel? The words knock the breath out of him, and Kenya goes speechless for a moment. Kenya stares at his own shaking hands, admitting he's terrified and doesn't know if what he's doing is right, while Akagami Ishin holds his gaze steady and tells him, straight up, that in his eyes Kenya is still just a kid, and he promises he'll never shove him into this, whatever choice the boy makes. His fear crumbles and resolve slams into place. Kenya clenches his fists, eyes blazing, and vows he'll fight, shouting that only he can do this, so the Kaguya he loves will finally stop suffering. Akagami Ishin hears her burning vow, and a small, knowing grin snaps onto his face, like he already realizes Kaguya just pulled an amazing guy into their lives. Kenya freezes, thrown off by Ishin's reaction, and asks if he said something weird, but Ishin just shrugs and says, no, I didn't. He then steps forward and formally welcomes Kenya to Amaterasu, and when their hands lock, Kenya nods and says he'll be in their care. Once that choice is made, Ishin leans in and gives a battlefield lesson, telling Kenya that when fear creeps in and he starts second-guessing himself, he needs to cling to the crushing power of what he's holding onto right now. His goal, his purpose, the conviction that can't bend, can't break, and can't ever waver. Elsewhere, Akagami Kaguya feels something powerful in her gut and smirks like she already knows, while Riene Sylphide stands right beside her, calm but unshakably determined, vowing to forge a way forward. With Ishin back in the moment, he finishes his thought and says that this conviction is what's going to hold Kenya up as he fights to save them both. The tension finally cracks. Kenya, drained to the bone, slumps into Ishin's shoulder and drifts off to sleep. Ishin watches him relax at last and tells him, softly, to rest well. While he finally catches his breath, Akagami Kaguya slips up behind a corner, right on him. Ishin snaps his head around and shouts her name the instant he senses her. She freezes, startled, and tucks her hands behind her back, then admits, just quietly, that she did notice Kenya's choice, more or less. Her whole face burns red the moment her father, Akagami Ishin, calls it out. She instantly panics, stammers that it's nothing, and swears she's only a little hot. He then jabs a gesture at Kenya, passed out from sheer exhaustion, telling Kaguya to take his spot and that he's about to go thank everyone. Then he walks off and leaves her to guard the sleeping boy. As she scoots beside him, Kenyan mumbles her name in his sleep, so softly it almost vanishes. Then Kaguya jolts, staring at him, wondering if he's really awake. He keeps mumbling, muttering that she's weird, but he grits out that it's okay for now, just for a short while. She hears his half-asleep words, and a soft smile blooms on her face as she quietly thanks him for standing shoulder to shoulder with them. That night she's alone on her bed, staring out at the glittering sky, and whispering Kenya a heartfelt good night. Meanwhile, in another corner of the war, a battle ends with merciless finality, because a KOG capture op was meant to blaze a path to victory, and no one realizes yet that everything's about to go wrong. A towering mech tears another one to shreds, and the pilot's screams fill the air as his cockpit gets ripped wide open. The winner is revealed, Sieg Sylphide, and he towers over the terrified, beaten pilot, grinning as he cruelly orders him to sit there and listen to his agonizing death. He showed zero mercy, slamming his KOG down on the enemy pilot. His screams to stop fell on deaf ears as a brutal blade split the man's machine clean in half, and he crashed down to the ground below. With one final blast, he smashed the remains to dust, cackling at the pathetic scream he claimed he'd heard, then muttered that it was a waste of a KOG on a pilot like that. Checking his work, he saw it was almost done, and over comms he snapped at his subordinate Jillian, grumbling that today's hunt had been dull, then pressed her about the report that had just come in. The battlefield screamed with his efficiency, an ashen graveyard of machines and fallen men, and he just stood over the wreckage like, whoever did this must have had the best time of their life. Back at the command post, his temper curdled fast. He slammed his fist down and demanded to know why Princess Emir, of all people, was in this mess. He snapped that it had to be because military control had slipped. Lord Asgard watched his brother's rage without flinching, and just said that Sieg had a knack for spotting things like this. He clutched his head, wobbling from the shock, because the torture princess he cursed was already on her way to Colony 13. Lord Asgard leaned in on his brother's worries and dropped a brutal truth. No matter where Princess Emir goes, the battlefield starts spilling blood like it's inevitable. Elsewhere, the very reason they feared her, first Princess Emir Asgard, did not disappoint. She stood over a tied-up captive, wearing a vicious grin, yanked the leash, and decided it had been long enough. Maybe it was time she went to call on Lord Sean. At the breakfast table, Sieg keeps feeding sips from his cup, but his head's weighed down. He can't stop worrying about his brand new job as the military attaché for Colony 13, the mess swirling around Princess Emir, and this sudden mysterious KOG unit that's showing up out of nowhere, while his troubled reflection stares back from his soup like a silent papa echoing every thought. Renee stands up across from him in a huff, flashes a sharp apology, and says she's heading out for her morning training. Sieg then asks if she's going back with that guy again, and Renee snaps back with burning confidence. She's absolutely winning today. As she's getting ready to head out, she grins and challenges him to a mock battle, saying it's been way too long. Meanwhile, Sieg, still munching on toast, laughs bright and tells her to take care, and Raynor shoots back that she'll be late tonight, asking to do it another time. The second she's gone, his bright smile collapses in on itself. He clenches his toes hard, face twisting with pure misery as the truth hits, because Renee, his daughter, is now thrilled to talk about a boy every single day. Her thoughts snap back to when she was younger, back when she wouldn't even spare a glance to any man but him, until she finally realizes with a jolt that she's reached that age. Continues to torment him, and the memory hits hard. Alfred once ranted about the same kind of humiliation, all caused by that exact boy, and it even felt like Lord Asgard himself was watching the student up close. So the conclusion lands like a punch. There's no way some second-class nobody is that strong. There has to be a trick, something hidden. A stubborn resolve hardens into a decision. Now Sieg stands in his war god uniform, goggles on, arms crossed, and demands to test the boy's skills himself, while Kaguya Akagami fumes at the audacity, gassing his title in pure disbelief. He snaps his focus to the students, and Kaguya and Kinya Mitsurugi jolt up, shocked. Kaguya blurts out why the principal is even here, and SEAG just grins faintly, calling her rookie girl, like he already knew. He grins and says he just wanted to test that man's sword, calling it the guy Riene talks about every morning. Riene's cheeks burn as she swears he's exaggerating, and Kaguya lets out a quiet sigh of relief that their past didn't get spilled. That friendly smile vanishes the second an intimidating grin snaps into place as he leans in, practically pressing close to his sword. Then he clocks the boy as the rumored rookie and growls that it looks like his daughter's in good hands. The sword is caught off guard, stammering as confusion hits hard. He keeps sizing the kid up, hand on his chin, wondering in his gut if this is really the boy Reina likes, just a scrawny, weak-looking nobody to him, nothing special, not even close. The young man breaks into a nervous sweat and can only sputter a shaky, awkward thanks for the support. Dropping every act, his face snaps into a predator's grin as he throws down one brutal challenge. Fight me, rookie. The swordsman's expressions twist in shock, still trying to wrap their minds around the war god's sudden invitation. Challenge accepted. Boom, the simulation kicks off. Above the chosen battlefield, a huge fight marker flickers into existence over that broken, desolate city ruin, and you'll feel it in your bones. This isn't some game anymore, this is the real fight. Amid the ruined city, Sword's Knight of Giga stands alone and drinks in the chaos around him, shocked that this is his very first fight in such a tangled maze of debris and ruins. A cloud of dust explodes down the street as another machine rips into view, roaring like thunder. Then Sieg's booming voice blasts out of the cockpit, grilling the rookie, "You ready?" Sieg's KOG Ikez springs to life with the ungula, this brutal, claw-like weapon arm, and he smirks like, "Sure, I backed away from the front lines, but I never stopped training." Inside the cockpit, Sword's worry snaps into pure excitement. Sieg grins and fires back, daring them to go all out and fight each other without holding back. He realizes his KOG's attacks bounce right off the principal's machine like nothing, while Sieg Sylphid sits in his cockpit, smirking and calling the rookie's weapon a pathetic pea-shooter, like, "Is that all you've got?" And the second the young pilot sees Sieg starting to close in, he knows he's about to be in deep, serious trouble. The machine definitely weaves away from that brutal strike. Then, to boost its mobility, it ejects its cannon, and C instantly starts doubting whether that was really the smart move. From the stands, Akagami Kaguya whispers to Riene Sylphide, "Yeah, I've heard the war god stories, but this is the first time I'm seeing him in action." Then she turns to Riene, demanding her take on the fight, and Riene just freezes because she doesn't really know either. She keeps talking and Kaguya's world flips because she just revealed a terrifying truth. She lost every memory up to age 10. That's when the war god Sieg, her adoptive father, stepped in and took her in. Reina admits she has zero clue what her real father was like before that, and nobody has ever shown her so much as a single file from his time serving on active duty. Haja leans in, asking if something's wrong, but Riene brushes it off. Then, with total confidence, she declares that even though she's only ever watched him go at it in simulations, she's never seen her father lose. Inside the simulation, Sword blasts out a blazing arcing move called Sonic Fawn, and a huge grin snaps onto his face as the battle rush hits him, basically laughing that it's all so fun. Even Siegluckson's jaw drops, impressed that this rookie nailed the technique on the very first attempt. Sieg slams his shield straight into the powerful attack, face first, no flinching, only to watch the rule hit like a death sentence. The barrier won't hold, and just like he warned, it shatters into pieces, leaving him staring in shock, totally unable to believe what he's seeing. But the destruction was only a decoy. Sieg smirked, baiting his opponent with the idea of losing now to win later. The moment Sword realizes he's been played, Sieg's KOG rockets through the debris, its claw driving straight for the leg of Sword's machine. Sieg's KOG slammed in close and he froze in stunned silence. The principal admitted it had been a while since his unit last took damage, then muttered that this had to be the ceiling for mass-produced models, while Sword just stared in awe, realizing this was the war god's real power, because when the two machines finally locked horns, Sieg swore the next strike would be the last. In a blinding flash of steel on steel, they both struck at the exact same moment, two brutal, decisive hits, then their health bars crashed together, sealing the duel's end. The system flashed the result for everyone to see. Draw and Riene and Kaguya, stuck on the sidelines, could only stare in stunned disbelief at the twist. In the training room, Sword flinched when a heavy sea of gloom rolled over him, convinced he'd taken that mock battle way too seriously, until the principal thundered over and slapped his back, booming with praise as samurai boys. He stood frozen in confusion as Riene and Kaguya stormed up beside him, Riene demanding the principal's verdict while Sig clapped that Sword's instincts were sharp, and even though Kaguya snapped that Sword had gone too far, he admitted that he got swept up, but he also knew he still hadn't tapped his full power in that fight. Right in the middle of their talk, a new voice cut in. Lord Asgard stepped forward, praising the mock battle as thrilling and admitting it had him hooked the whole time. Then he lifted his trembling hands like proof, and Reina stared up, shocked that the prince had just shown up out of nowhere. He told them why he was there. He'd heard some students were sticking around after school to train, and that grabbed his attention. Riene crossed her arms and said it was totally fine, but Kaguya wouldn't look up. She stared at the floor like she didn't want to see any of it. Panic snapped through her mind. Had the prince heard every word during that chaos? Lord Asgard caught her tension and calmly told her he wasn't listening at all. Then his gaze slid to Riene, and his face changed as he said something else had stolen his curiosity. Lord Asgard tore his focus away from the women and strode straight at the other duelist. Mitsurugi Keniakun, was it? As soon as he asked, the name still hanging in the air, the blade spun out of nowhere, catching him completely off guard. He shot out his hand with a grin that lit up his face, winked, and announced he'd been a fan of swords since his very first fight, then admitted he couldn't believe the kid could hold Seed to a draw. Sword just froze, staring in shock at the sudden praise coming straight from royalty. His thoughts spun out of control, because the Prince of the Empire was offering a handshake to some second-class student, and the whole moment was so far beyond the rules of their world that his brain couldn't even make sense of it. The prince kept his hand rock steady, face unreadable, even as he admitted it was stained with blood, and said the choice to take it was a sword's decision, not his. He braced for a showdown with Sieg, sure, but the prince showing up in person was a curveball he never saw coming, leaving him staring at that offered hand, torn over the consequences of partnering with a fraud. Lord Asgard closes in on Sword with a smug smile, admitting he really doesn't know much about him since Sword never mattered in the game, and that's when Sword's guard snaps up, because this sudden attention has gotta be hiding a catch. His mind races as the moment slams into him. This is it, a real fork in the road, shake hands or walk away. And he's sure of one thing, the handshake is going to trigger something huge, like the switch that opens a whole new path. Trusting his gamer instincts, he snaps into action, fists clenched, eyes locked on the goal, deciding he'll take any flag they hand him, as long as it's meant to save the heroines. Renew Sulphide thrusts out his hand, and everyone's eyes snap to the moment, while Renew Sulphide and Sieg Sulphide stare at how the royal crowd, led by Lord Asgard, plays it out. The sword of a second-class kid, because the meeting is really a clash between the one society crowns as ruler and the one it throws away as an outcast. Their hands lock in a brutal, iron-tight clasp, and in that single moment, two forces collide, sparking a fateful battle that's set to swallow the whole world. When the handshake finally ends, Lord Asgard declares he's gone, right as Sieg leans in and says Sword is a real interesting one. And as Lord Asgard turns away, he can't help but think about that firm grip, marveling at how long it's been since someone shook his hand like that. Then he turns to Sieg, declares his sword skills are flawless, and orders him to throw the case away for good. Sieg just nods and agrees. A hand clamped onto Sword's shoulder, and the man spilled the truth. He'd seen Sword's skills and now wanted a favor. Sword's heart hammered. This moment wasn't in the game, but it could be the perfect ticket to get inside the Empire. He nodded instantly, grinning like he'd just won the lottery as he promised to help, and Kaguya's face snapped into pure horror, her eyes bulging with disbelief as she blurted out that she couldn't allow it. Sieg's voice sliced through the air, low, sharp, and deadly serious, warning Sword not to trust that smile, because they were still enemies, and pressing the brutal question of how many lives the man in front of them had already taken. Stubborn as stone, he demanded that they stop him, yet Lord Asgard stayed cool, strode up to Sieg and Kaguya, apologized, and said he only wanted Sword for a while. Sword didn't even flinch. He told him don't worry, and promised he'd meet them later. Right as he turned to walk off with Lord Asgard, a hand suddenly clamped onto the back of his jacket, yanking him to a stop. He snapped around, stunned, and looked. She stared at Kaguya, sleeve still clutched in her hand, and asked what was wrong, only to get a jittery, confused little blur of a sound back. A grin flickered across his face as he leaned in and teased, asking if she was upset just because she wanted more time with him. Then Kaguya practically stammered, immediately denying it and insisting that wasn't the case. He let out a chuckle, swore it was all a joke, then turned to go with Lord Asgard, while Kaguya stayed behind, stuttering that it wasn't what she meant, her real warning dying in her throat. Left behind, Kaguya clenches her fist, frustration boiling as she can't shake the feeling that honesty is out of reach. Riene's Sylphide stares at her, eyes filled with a sharp, unanswered question. Riene shoots Kaguya a reassuring grin, telling her she doesn't have to worry about Kenya at all. Her dad won't treat him unfairly just because he's second class, and Kaguya immediately looks aside, cheeks hot, trying to deny she'd even been worried. She snaps back that it's not about that, she just remembers something from right now, and as she talks, her hand starts to tremble. Reina lunges forward out of nowhere and drags the startled Kaguya into a bone-crushing hug. As Riene cradles her, she strokes Kaguya's hair and whispers, "You're okay." She admits Kaguya was trembling, and that this is what her own father used to do to shut down her panic, only for Kaguya to blink, stunned by the sudden closeness. Kaguya scoots back a little, all flustered, blurting to Riene not to get so close, then stammers out a shaky thank you. Riene watches her with a quiet focus, realizing Kaguya is still that woman from the Empire. Tears start to gather, and Kaguya admits to herself she's not actually hating this at all. She's just stunned by how neither Kenya nor Riene seems to respect personal boundaries. Kaguya steadies her breath, declares she's got to pull herself together, and swears she'll win next time, while Riene grins, loving that fire, and tells her to slow down for now. The story slams into a lockdown, gated facility. Then a military truck barrels toward the entrance as two armed guards stand their ground before a huge building, stamped with a strange, unfamiliar emblem. Sieg's Sylphide guides Sword through a gauntlet of security gates and into a dazzling corridor, where a guard snaps in. This is a KOG research center, owned by His Highness himself, while Sword drinks in the glowing halls with a calm, intense look like he's quietly thinking everything through. As soon as they step into the office, chaos hits them, papers everywhere, and someone sprawled face down on the floor. Sword snaps into panic, swearing the person's dead, but Sieg cuts him off and calls it business as usual for the tech chief. Then Sieg leans in and reminds Sword that, since he's a second-class citizen, he can grab and use whatever he needs from this place. The guy on the floor groans and stirs, pushing himself upright. Then Sieg's voice hits and he immediately recognizes it, blurting an apology for how he looks and admitting he's been running on zero sleep. With Tanaka Seikara, KOG's research and tech chief, now fully on his feet, he eyes Sieg and demands to know why he's here at his facility. Right before Sieg can even speak, Lord Asgard steps up and lays everything out. Sieg then pitches his plan to build a sword that uses his one-of-a-kind skills and help back the research. The moment it hits, Tanaka freezes, clearly drowning in the sheer flood of info about KOGs. Even with his first jolt of surprise, Tanaka steps up and properly introduces himself to Sword, and Sword shakes right back, then Sieg grins and drops the good news. They're standing in a huge hangar built for one thing: repairing damaged KOGs and testing fresh weapon models between every maintenance cycle. Tanaka lays out his research, KOGs for the Empire ever since before the war, and blasts the idea of dragging in a second-class citizen, while Lord Asgard shuts him down fast, saying his personal stamp is on it and the sword skills will match Lady Rini's at the very least. Once that's settled, Sieg leans in and asks where a certain item is, and Tanaka answers that it should be back any time now. The moment he's done talking, a thunderous crash slams the outside world and rattles the whole facility. Everyone jolts, flinching hard at the sudden violence. As the dust finally clears and the base turns into pure chaos, Tanaka just lets out a laugh and shrugs it off like this is normal, while Sieg watches with a sharp, bitter look, really asking if this mess is actually okay, and then he quietly takes in the wreckage in silence. He locked eyes with the spiraling dust, and then it hit. Real recognition flashed hard in his stare, because right there, before all that debris settled, a lone figure stood watching him. Out of the chaos, a colossal machine tore through the wreckage, white and gold armor blazing under the light. It was the Takamakazuchi, and it struck a brutal, ready stance like it was about to unleash thunder. Its optical sensors blazed with raw, buried power, and then a voice cut in. This was the newest 6th-gen machine, a prototype still cooking in development. Inaka explained that once they stuffed the machine with a ton of advanced systems, it turned into a beast average pilots couldn't even control, so they couldn't pull together much useful data. Or Sword, because this wasn't just a machine. It was his pride, his fastest unit, the one he poured his entire youth into, riding every win and every brutal loss inside the virtual world. Back in the present, Sieg snapped his head around and flashed a knowing grin, telling him the samurai boy was already hip to the machine's legend, then formally asked if he'd be the one to test it as the test pilot. Blinded by emotion, he strode up and slapped his hand against the machine's armored leg like it was his partner, and with a grin that split his face, he blurted out that he was thrilled to see it again, then pumped his fist and joyfully accepted the offer. Inside a testing facility, a brand new white knight of the gold unit darts through simulated enemy fire, slicing the chaos with razor-sharp, perfectly controlled moves. Stagility gets thrown into a chaotic battlefield to see if it truly holds, sprinting through the chaos and slipping past a non-stop storm of projectiles during its mobility trial. Then the test snaps into flight mode. This machine blasts through the sky at jaw-dropping speed, carving streaks of light into the air behind it. In the control room, Tech Chief Tanaka Sekera watches his own grin flare up with pure excitement and practically shouts that the performance is unbelievable. Even up in the observation deck, everyone's staring in awe, watching the pilot tame that famously brutal machine at blistering speeds like it's nothing. In the cockpit, Kenya Mitsurugi says he's fine, then his voice pops through the comms as he asks, "You ready to try that special function we talked about?" Kenya answers immediately, "Yeah, I'm ready, I'll test it." Back in the control room, Tanaka's face tightens with pure intensity as he locks onto the screens, and his tech blurts out that the function still hasn't been adjusted. Tanaka snaps back that this is exactly why they have to fix it now, eyes glued to the monitor as he mutters, almost to himself, about what Mitsurugi Kenya really is. Even while everyone else falters, KOG has remained locked in calm eyes, iron resolve, and Kenya swears that if they all stumbled, then this might be the one time he finally breaks through and wins. Just as the test ends, everything explodes into a brand new development. Massive transport ship drops out of the sky, engines roaring and blasting clouds of dust, and down on the ground, Sieg Sylphid, Lord Asgard, and 2 other officers stare at its jaw-dropping arrival. I watched the transport ship's ramp drop and out stepped a shadowy figure, and the second I recognized her, sweat prickled on my brow as if she'd finally made it. She closed the distance and greeted him like she'd never left, saying it had been ages. Sieg straightened up, swallowed a little vow, and formally welcomed her to Colony 13, making it clear they'd been waiting on her. That was Princess Emir. People feared her far more as the Princess of Torture ***, and she wore a confident, predatory grin like she'd already chosen your fate. Later, in a briefing room, she didn't waste a second. She snapped that the princess wanted the pig's location, pointing at Amaterasu as the target group. Asgard pointed at a huge map and said he's sure the group is tucked somewhere out there in the Kanto slums, but nobody's been able to confirm the exact spot yet. They lean in, grilling the delay, knowing exactly where this goes. She can't shake the feeling that whatever's slowing them down is only making the enemy bolder. Her face twisted into a hungry, dark grin, and she snapped at them to scrub the slums clean right now, because she was sure the residents would be pushed out, one way or another. Then she whipped around to her knight, Jillian Shikimanohi, asking for his word, and with his hands clasped behind his back, he gave a solemn nod, confirming she was right. With her proposal still hanging in the air, Sieg Sylphid stared at the man beside her, and realized it was Jillian, the brand new holy knight. The moment he understood, pity hit him hard, because whoever got stuck playing Emir's knight had to endure a nightmare in armor. Lord Asgard couldn't stay quiet. He exploded out of his seat, begged her to rethink the plan, and screamed that it would doom innocent civilians with casualties. His desperate plea crashed into a brutal, heavy silence. He and the young sword fighter sat rigid at the conference table while Princess Emer stood with her back to them, refusing to give them a single answer. A cold gut-punch realization hit Sieg Sylphid, and his eyes flew wide as he finally grasped just how massive his mistake really was. He cursed himself for the mistake. Why in the world did he bring a former Yamato soldier into Princess Emer's presence? Sieg's inner panic was still hidden, but Lord Asgard hammered his objection again. Then I shot back, "Please reconsider," and he cut me off with a hard no. Across the room, Emer's eyes narrowed and a wide, menacing smile slid onto her face as she taunted him to repeat exactly what he just said. A blur of motion and she's suddenly right over him. Her hand slides under his chin and tilts his gaze up. "Oh my," she coos, close enough that her presence hits like pressure, pinning him in place as shock freezes him. Her smile snapped into a predatory grin, eyes glittering with mean delight, and she swore she was just curious what he'd been saying, then jerked his attention to the insignia on her thigh, the one that labeled her a second class. She slams her hand down, pouring crackling dark energy into Akagami Ishin's wrist and ripping a scream of agony straight out of the former general, because as a second class, her power is unstoppable. Lord Asgard and Sieg Sylphid are left staring, the first frozen in horror while the other looks like he's watching a ladder with detached interest. He gritted his teeth and fought to reason with her, shouting that there were no humans in the target area, but she flashed a wild grin and brushed it off, saying that to her, they were just livestock, their lives dangling to her every whim. The princess's cruelty hits Lord Asgard like a spark, and he strides up to the shaking Ishin, riding crop clattering to the floor, as he leans in with a wild intensity, praising how Ishin's hard work, even with his lowly station, is somehow lighting a fire inside him. Before Ishin can even react, two of Lord Asgard's men grab him by the arms. Then the prince steps in, declaring it's his own duty too, and whips his razor-sharp gaze to Princess Emer, pressing her like, "So who do you think you're talking to?" What? Snapping at his defiance, Emer grabs the riding crop and lands a brutal strike across Ishin's face, roaring for him to remember his place. Then she vows to beat the lesson into him, calling him nothing but a dog who betrayed his own country. The chaos stops just as suddenly as it started. Lord Asgard calmly thanks his older sister for showing up, and the terrifying glare she came in with vanishes instantly, replaced by a bright, sparkling adoration as she gushes over her younger brother. She yanks him into a crushing hug and blurts out the truth. She's been lonely ever since he suddenly announced he was taking control of Colony 13. He lays it all out, saying it's only natural for a royal to step up when their father's gone, then flicks his eyes towards Sieg like, "I see that drive," before warning that the wrong factions have been running wild, and he's done letting it slide. A newly arrived woman, radiant and royal in every step, told him to finally stop worrying because she'd taken her place, then promised she'd teach him what it truly means to be a strong lord, pointing out that his men lacked discipline, and when she spoke, the three young guys behind him dropped their heads. He could only admit it was his own failing. He looked at her confession and froze, then demanded if she really planned to storm the mission on her own. With a sharp, confident flick of her finger, she snapped back, "Yes, of course I am." Then she pulled out her trump card, Regina, her own personal unit, dragging her into the fight, and in that huge hangar, a whole squad of humanoid war machines stood waiting, with Regina looming at the front. To make it worse, she said her troops would roll in soon too. Satisfaction flared across his face as he recognized her skill. Right then, his sister Amab burst in with a huge, wild grin, practically vibrating with anticipation, and she declared she'd jump into this hunt with both feet. As Emer celebrated, he slid in and cut her off with a calm but decisive voice, saying he'd already made the right impression, but the operational prep was her job. Polite yet unshakable, he thanked her and quietly sent her packing from the moment right there. Once Emer was out of the way, Sylphie slid up to Sieg and noticed right away that Lord Asgard had something heavy to say. The prince spun toward him, admitted the request sounded disrespectful, and then pleaded, soft but firm, for Sieg to make it quick and cut as little blood as possible. When he heard their words, all three of his subordinates snapped to one knee, begging him with everything they had. He stared down at their bowed heads and flat out said, "I know." Sieg's eyes sharpened as the prince's words hit home, so Lord Asgard really was nothing like that woman, Emer. Standing right beside him, Lord Asgard cut in, swearing he didn't care about all that and pushing them to handle the whole mess fast. Kinya Mitsurugi, far away from the royal family's mess, flopped onto his apartment bed and let out a heavy, tired sigh, because he was completely wiped out. His burnout was earned the hard way, by juggling identities nonstop. A student by day, a self-taught test pilot after school, and a help to the resistance in the slums every weekend. He groaned into his pillow as he finally tasted this wild new life with the KOGS and all the heroines. And it was actually fun, but it hit hard for someone who'd only just crawled out of being a full-on shut-in. His mind drifted to the machines again. Yeah, the Equus unit was great, but his body still craved that old rush of steering the Takamikazuchi, a power he swore he'd claim one day. But the road ahead felt like a trapdoor, and he threw his hands over his eyes, trying to figure out what to do next. He'd actually gotten close to both the Empire and the Resistance, only to realize that being the main character is brutal. Then, right as dread settled in, his phone started buzzing on the bed next to him. On the other end of the line, Renee Sylphide leaned by her window, staring outside while she picked up the call. Then Kenya's voice snapped through the line, and she let out a surprised remark. It was rare for him to reach out like this. He told her he needed the next day off for personal reasons and begged her to cancel his morning training. Renee agreed, then immediately asked if he wanted to talk about anything else, and he admitted he was glad he called, even though he could have just sent a message. His hesitation snapped, and out of nowhere he blurted a question he shouldn't, something about Kaguya. Aside from you, he started, what do you think Kaguya thinks of me? Reina dropped into her seat, utterly stunned. Wait, aside from me, she shot back, her voice blazing with indignation. She stared at her own loneliness and couldn't shake it. She barely knew how to fit in, but she noticed the same thing everywhere. People kept their distance, whispering that she was the daughter of the war god or the ice princess. Still, Kaguya, an Empire girl, didn't step back at all. Renee found that hilarious, and she even thought, yeah, she'd love it if Kaguya treated her like both a friend and a rival. Even with those warm thoughts buzzing in her head, that phone call still iced her heart. She curled up on her bed, hunched over her phone, staring at the screen in the dead quiet of her room. Tears surged in her eyes as she choked out one trembling apology into the cold, empty silence. On the other end of the line, Kenya slammed the call shut. Renee had blurted out, aside from you, what do you mean? Then bolted with a flimsy excuse about the time, telling him to let Kaguya know the cancellation. Her last words came out soft, just a quiet goodbye. Back in his room, sleepiness crashed over him, and all he could think was that Renee had been acting weird. Maybe she was coming down with a cold. He bolted upright in bed, unease crawling up his spine, because Reina's call kept replaying in his head like a warning he couldn't ignore. As he stood in his room, a weird wave of déjà vu hit him, like he'd felt it all before. He doused his face with cold water, desperately trying to kick the feeling out, but it clung to him anyway, like he'd heard those exact words in that exact tone before. That one word yanked a memory straight out of his nightmares, and his eyes snapped wide with pure terror, because he instantly knew with ice-cold certainty that rain is goodbye was the warning that the disaster was about to start. His mind reeled as the memory crashed back, one brutal battle event, a 1v100 KOG showdown, the kind he knew way too well. It hit him like a fist to the chest. This was happening way too soon. They were still barely in the opening stages of the game. He couldn't stop asking himself if his own moves had somehow shoved the timeline forward, ripping the battle out of schedule. He already knew what was coming next. If the world played by the game's script, the Empire's KOGs would drop into the slums, and by the time he reached the area, the whole district would be flattened, with the resistance and countless ordinary people getting dragged into the slaughter and killed. Rage and urgency lit a fire under him. He cursed, snatched his phone, and ripped out the door, desperate to move right now. He sprinted down the street, phone pinned to his ear, calling Kaguya. Then he blurted out a frantic apology, insisting they had to rush to her father's place right now because there was absolutely no time to waste. But on her end, her voice was full of confusion, and she was already near the school, demanding to know what kind of joke he was trying to pull. She planted herself at the school gates, fed up, and ordered him to tell her the second training got canceled, because if something was really wrong, they'd be notified, and besides, going to that place always comes with risks. Her speech got cut off when Kenya suddenly burst in, snatched her arm, and stopped her cold. He met her startled gaze with pure desperation, blasting out that he wasn't messing around, screaming that if they didn't bolt right now, everyone would be walking straight into grave danger. His heartfelt plea cut through her doubts. When she saw the raw panic in his eyes, she finally caved. I get it if you say so, she murmured, and with one last desperate push, he begged her to trust him. He slams the accelerator, jolting the van forward as Kaguya braces hard, the streets whipping by beneath them. Inside the rattling car, Kaguya snaps about how terrible this ride is. Why would they trust a slow, second-class seat unless something's fishy? So go on, can you seriously argue this disguise is the only shot they have to slip past the Empire? She pushes him to hurry and dial already, but he blurts out that he's been connected the whole time. Turns out the voice on the line is her father, Ishin, and when Kenya confirms he's safe, the tension finally breaks and relief hits hard. His relief lasts about 2 seconds, then reality slams in. The Empire has them surrounded. To his utter shock, Princess Amur is right there on the scene too, and he's stunned by a twist he never saw coming from the game's original storyline. Right on the call, Ishin blurts a warning, don't come closer. Kaguya yells, totally lost, but her father can only pass along what he just heard. The situation is bad, and backup is already sprinting toward them. Asani's voice slices through the chaos, urging Kenya to hang on with iron resolve. Then he vows he'll jump into the fight himself. The story snaps over to Isshin, where he's standing face to face with Princess Amur and her towering knight of gold. Then she uses him to send the resistance one brutal message: surrender and you live. Refuse and you'll be branded traitors and executed. Kenya Mitsurugi and Kaguya Akagami stumble into a scene of total wreckage, their faces tightening with disbelief as they spot a truck's wheel half buried in the rubble nearby. A sickening jolt hits hard as they stare at the ruins of a colossal building, everything flattened to dust, and Kenya's dread slams in when he realizes the orphanage is completely gone. His head throbbed with anguish, screaming how they could have missed their timing. Then the second he sank into despair, Kaguya dropped to one knee, eyes locked on the wreckage, sensing something and confirming her fear. People were still trapped there. Intuition hits dead on. Those tiny, rushed footsteps of kids keep pounding out from inside the wreckage. The kids spill out straight into the looming shadow of a massive KOG unit, while the pilot's thunderous voice rips through the air, ordering the resistance to show themselves. Emphasize the threat, KOG blasts its weapon into a nearby structure, debris explodes through the air, and the children shriek in pure terror as the pilot issues the ultimatum. If the resistance doesn't show up, they'll slaughter every last one of them. Seeing it, Kenya surges forward on instinct, ready to rescue them, until Kaguya yanks him back by the jacket collar and slams him to a stop. Huddled in hiding, he finally clocks how brutal it is, but Kaguya orders him, cold and clear. Why? She clamps down harder, yanking him back to reality, and then fires off a brutal reminder: his enemy is a KOG. Next, she demands to know what he thinks he can pull off by rushing in with nothing but his own body. She clung to him hard, hearing his desperate plea that they couldn't just leave the kids behind, and when she nodded along, she pulled out a tiny device she'd been saving for one exact moment, this very kind of chaos. Meanwhile, the pilot of the enemy KOG stared down at the captive kids and sneered, asking if it was over already. Then he shoved them onward, telling them they had to keep running to drag the resistance out where he could see them. The kids huddled tight, whispering in the dark. One boy panicked, begging to know if everyone really got out, and another shrugged, admitting he had no clue. Still, even with fear clawing at them, a girl and a younger boy clenched their courage and swore they'd hold the line all the way to the very end. Their quiet resolve snapped into outright defiance as the children shouted in one united voice at the machine, telling it they weren't afraid, and demanding to know if the pilot even felt shame for using them as they. Their courage got slapped with a furious order. The pilot barked at them to shut up, and the KOG's external speakers blasted so loud the kids flinched and clamped both hands over their ears. He pushed his threat again, and the machine's giant fist clenched like a nightmare about to strike, while the pilot snapped that the only thing they were allowed to do was scream even louder. The moment his threat landed on those kids, the pilot got jolted by a noise blasting from down the street, and his KOG snapped around, roaring toward the chaos. A massive gold transport truck came roaring down the road at full speed, barreling straight into a war machine like it wanted a showdown. The pilot leans into his mech sensors and spots the approaching truck, only to see the driver's seat sitting empty, and then he blasts out a savage command to stop right now. When his orders get ignored, fury spikes in the pilot, and he snaps, unleashing a burst of fire from his mech's weapon that blasts into the front of the speeding truck. The barrage crashes into one massive explosion, blasting the truck to pieces in a blinding flash of light and deadly shrapnel. The boom snaps the kids out of their thoughts, and they scramble to figure out where it came from, until they realize it wasn't the real attack at all, just a diversion, and now a wall of thick smoke is swallowing the whole area. Through the smoke, Kaguya and Kenya burst out screaming, "Run!" The kids snap their heads up, instantly relieved they've found their rescuers. Kaguya stays ice calm, orders them to stick close, and the escape starts right then. As they sprint away, Azusa, one of the young girls, trips and slams into the ground, and Kenya's scream rips through the chaos. Through the choking smoke, the KOG pilot spots them and vows the resistance won't slip out. The fallen girl gasps up in total despair. She's seconds from safety, but the finish line slips away, while Kenya lunges with everything he's got, reaching for her and screaming her name, only to find she's already out of reach. His scream gets choked off as the KOG's towering metal foot slams straight down on Azusa, Kenya, Kaguya, and the others, and all the children can do is stare, faces twisted with pure shock and fear. He lunged ahead and hurled the object with everything he had. Wham! A thunderous blast ripped into the KOG's leg, smashing its metal frame with seconds to spare before impact, and the colossal machine screamed in a writhing shriek as it finally started to topple. Amid the ruins and choking dust, he dropped to his knees, crushing Azusa to his chest as she trembled in his arms. She sobbed into his shoulder, spilling that fear had swallowed her whole, while just beyond them the other kids screamed with pure, overwhelming relief. Haja and the other kids barreled in to their side, and her voice cracked with worry as she checked Kenya and Azusa, making sure they were okay. Kenya nodded that everyone was unharmed, then he asked about the rest, clutched Azusa to his chest, and praised her courage, swearing the danger was finally over. Then that familiar voice sliced through the chaos. Akagami Ishin showed up just in time, breathless with relief. Kaguya gasped in shock, yelled "Dad," and immediately spotted his injuries. He tried to play it down, saying the princess's guards were already there, even though getting here hadn't come without a real fight. He scanned the kids, praised every last one for their hard work, and then dropped the amazing news. Everyone at the orphanage was officially under protection at last. As Azusa stared up at him, doubt flickered, then his expression turned cold as stone. He nodded to Ishin that they were safe for the moment, but warned them not to relax. Plenty of others had already bolted and were still out there, scattered and easy targets. His eyes narrowed, burning with deadly intent. "I'll crush those bastards," he swore, knuckles whitening as his fist clenched. When Ishin asked why now, he snapped that it had to happen today, that he alone was the one who could do it. His reason was simple and brutal: protect the home they were handed, now defiled by their enemies. Seeing that sudden shift, Kaguya's breath caught. She panicked and shouted his name, because the cold, spine-tingling aura radiating from him felt nothing like his usual self. Her father ordered her to yank the enemy's focus away from Kenya and stall him until every civilian was safely out. Kaguya nodded immediately, locking in the mission. As she watched, he barked one last instruction at her, casual thumbs up, but his voice was pure intensity. He told her it was okay, because he was leaving everyone in her care. Then his expression snapped hard, eyes burning with a cold, ruthless fire, and he crossed his arms to seal it with a solemn vow. He would defeat them all, while the whole night burned in fury. His vow got ripped open the second it was made. Amid the wreckage of the city, he and Kaguya sprinted on foot, battling mercilessly against towering mechanical soldiers, dodging blast after blast and cutting through the battlefield chaos like they had no choice. From up on their high perch, the enemy pilots stared down the fight with nothing but contempt. One even pinged Jillian to ask if these were the same resistance fighters from the footage, then laughed at how pathetic and dull they looked, even as they admitted one of the downed units was something special, just like they'd predicted. Lord Jillian sat there taking the report, firing questions at his pilot. Had they spotted anything worth mentioning yet? Right next to him, Princess Emir couldn't hold back her fury, demanding to know why their target still hadn't shown up after they'd already slaughtered so many of the resistance fighters. Inside the command center, the operator stares at a tactical screen when an alarm suddenly blares. Point H is getting slammed, but the operator can't make sense of it. The enemy count is higher than expected, yet only one attacker is supposedly behind it, so they're left guessing who this lone powerhouse really is. Amid the rubble of a shattered city, the Met squad crouches and waits until a lone figure rockets out of the sky. One pilot snaps into action, confirming the rumor is real. The princess has finally arrived, and the newcomer is exactly who they came to hunt. An arrival mech packed with rabbit-like flair rolls in and squares up against another unit, and its pilot lets out a smug chuckle, taunting, "So that's your trump card." The other pilot just stays silent. Is littered with the casualties of the assault, and a civilian lies still, motionless in the wreckage of shattered rock and debris. Out of the chaos, Akagami Ishin lunges back into the confrontation, grilling the pilot from the start. Why is she murdering civilians, even the ones who aren't fighting back? And when she hears his questions, she smirks, saying the way he's looking at it is totally off. Her expression snaps into manic contempt. She scoffs at needing permission to hunt down the pigs she talks about, and swears to herself that every human is just livestock. Upon hearing this, a dark, knowing smile creeps across Isha's face as he murmurs her words like he's sealing a deal, and deep down he feels, finally, everything clicks. His smile dies instantly, and icy rage takes over his face, eyes locked shut with grim determination as he declares he'll finally fight her, no hesitation at all. While the battle rages, a brand new fighter crashes onto the scene. Princess Anu, calling from her command post, tells her knight Jillian to haul her enemy away and keep him alive. Jillian snaps to attention from his cockpit, grinning that he'll make sure the man learns his lesson personally, and that the princess will get victory. The two cogs collide, exploding into a rain of sparks, and inside his cockpit, Akagami Ishin freezes, because the enemy's blade just slammed into him, and he can't believe he's been hit. Suddenly, boom, a brutal explosion rips through Gulf's knight and Jillian's machine. The blast hurls his KOG backward, and all he can think about is his princess. With Jillian's KOG left wrecked, the sword is jammed uselessly in the dirt. Akagami Ishin can only stare at the knight, still in shock. He was knocked out by one brutal hit. Then he whips around to the newcomer, barking, "Who are you?" Kenya Mitsurugi, the pilot of a brand new KOG, steps forward and reveals himself, cool as ice, declaring that the moment his opponent crossed into his range, their defeat was locked in by his mirage, his phantom slash. Then he snaps his focus to Anu, bragging that he's already mastered taking down fighters just like her, and that he'll pin her movement with adhesive bullets to kill her speed. But before his words even land, Anu's machine rockets forward, blade whirling as she screams that his neck is wide open. She scoffs, sure that Gamer's gotten too cocky, until her strike gets parried like a joke and she gets shoved onto the defensive, stunned that she asterisk the princess is getting overpowered, and wondering if this sharp, terrifying panic is what all her victims feel when they face her, a single pig. Terror swells into a brutal truth. She's going to lose, she's going to die, and she can't even scream it out loud as denial breaks her. Inside, she vows to kill again, piling up lives just to rip more lives away. The machine lay smashed under him as he slammed down the rule of their world. The defeated must bow to the victor. Then he even wondered if that wasn't the truth everyone else was already living by. Those words yanked her into a nightmare, an enraged, shadowy figure swearing he'd never forgive a princess for touching what he held dear. The memory swelled into pure terror as his blade started the last, deadly drop, and he snarled that someone like her couldn't be allowed to live. Right as the blow was about to land, a flash tore through the air and metal shrieked like a scream. Then a brand new KOG cut in and caught the strike with its own blade, locking it in place. Thrown off balance, he barked, "Who are you?" The pilot of the silver machine straight up ignored him, slammed a private channel open to Princess Emir, and demanded she retreat at once while they seized control of the fight. His eyes snapped wide with pure disbelief, because that voice, there was no way it could be. Inside the cockpit of the silver KOG, Riene Sylphide locked eyes forward with iron resolve, and then he thundered her name through the comms, demanding answers on why she'd shown up on his battlefield. Amid the shattered ruins of a once-living city, two KOG units collide, one with wings blazing, the other charging in with a sword and shield. Up on a high perch, Emir Asgard surveys the battle unfold, Anu at her side, and she steps forward with unshakable command, demanding the fighters' names. Locked inside his cockpit, Kenya Mitsurugi stares at the battle again and feels his face turn to stone. This grim realization hits hard. Out of everyone who could be mixed up in this, it's Riene, and he can't shake the shock of why she'd step into a trap this dangerous. Rage crests inside him. He won't let that enemy pilot slip away on the battlefield. The winged KOG pilot laughs at their foe, calls them a resistance pig, and swears he'll come back for Riene. The defending pilot won't fold, and the fight snaps into a brutal stalemate while Kenya, brimming with doubt, tries to figure out what Riene's real mission is for showing up. Perch shoots a fresh smirk after hearing the name, then she purrs it back, Riene, locking it into memory with a dangerously pleased grin, while Emir stays perfectly calm and verifies the name right beside her. Meanwhile, inside her KOG unit, Reina Sylphie's face turns into pure grit, and she fires off a silent apology to her father, telling herself she had to be here with her own eyes to verify what she came for. Rain lashes the scene, rewinding us to the day before the operation. Reina walks alone through a long, silent hallway, her steps steady and locked on purpose. Then her determined walk slams to a stop. She freezes in the corridor, eyes bulging as shock hits because the operation is tomorrow. She stayed quiet by the office door, but unease crept up inside her, because her father almost never raised his voice, and that made her wonder what could possibly be wrong. A tense, urgent voice erupted from inside as he barked into the receiver, swearing Colony 13 was finally calming down and begging them to avoid anything that could spark an uprising, even if it meant letting the princess run wild on the battlefield. She overheard it and a cold shiver hit her. Then her father's voice shot up in panic, shouting that the princess might just butcher every last civilian in Islam. With a frustrated sigh, his final order was brutal. Brief the soldiers and make sure every casualty is kept to an absolute minimum as. He spun around, and that's when he finally clocked her standing in the doorway. Riene, he blurted, shocked because he suddenly realized he'd just hurt her. She blurted out an apology for overhearing, then fired off the question, did the planned operation get moved to tomorrow? Her father waved her off like it was nothing and said it didn't matter. With his arms crossed, he let the truth spill, every detail she'd overheard, and now it was official. Princess Emma herself was going to lead the hunt for the resistance. They had to go to extreme lengths, he said it plainly, because resistance activity had been surging in places everywhere lately. A screen flashes combat footage, showing a KOG transport hit in a fresh ambush, its whole escort wiped out by one enemy KOG pilot, proving the resistance has someone insanely skilled, and the next operation is all about taking that exact ace out. That news hits Riene while she's standing among her classmates, and you can practically see the realization click in her eyes. Then Kenya Mitsurugi blurts out, wait, could this tie into something else? and his voice fades as his thoughts take over. Her mind sprints, wondering if it's just a coincidence, though deep down, she knows that stretch is too thin. The fact that those two keep disappearing together suddenly feels loaded with meaning, and the worst part is she can't even trust her own certainty anymore. She's made up her mind, and now she stands in the doorway of her father's office, chin up, heart locked in, demanding permission to join the operation, insisting she has to verify something with her own eyes. She locks eyes with him, steady as steel, and asks if he's really sure about this. Then she tells him she believes he'll do everything he can to stop that from happening, and the moment he nods, she steps in and offers to help him make it happen. He weighs her offer for a heartbeat, then nods. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take any help I can get, but he slams down one strict rule. She stays out of the fight and only supports the KOG unit from the field. Riene gratefully accepts. In the hangar where the combat matches are about to kick off, Sieg gets slammed with an urgent report. Then a technician bursts in, yelling that the enemy machine is back and already wiped out 5 of their own units. A panicked Guardian soldier rushes into Riene's sylphid, shouting that the legendary enemy machine is zeroing in on Princess Emer's squad. Riene freezes, and suddenly it all clicks. The pilot is here to assassinate the princess. She snaps that she has to step in, then sprints straight for a nearby KOG, ignoring the soldier's frantic attempts to stop her, until she climbs into the cockpit and declares she's borrowing the unit. Outside, the Resistance pilot's machine is already waiting, but who's inside it is still a mystery. She rockets right into the chaos, her machine's sword hammering into the enemy's blades, and every impact tightens a brutal certainty in her chest. She prayed she was wrong, but the clash after clash only crushes that hope. Kenya Mitsurugi's face flashes through her mind, and the truth lands like a punch. She isn't just fighting anymore, she's the Resistance pilot. His rage points straight to where it all began, one night, a young kid crying in the wreckage of a ruined city, with the Guardian KOG standing right there. She tells him his anger makes sense, then, as the calm starts to settle in, she drops the truth. The encirclement is busted, and he'll finally be able to slip out. He won't answer. Riene's tears pour down her cheeks as she begs him to stay rational, warning that if he kills Princess Emer, the Empire will pull out every weapon and wipe the Resistance out completely. As she screams his name, Keniaku and his KOG won't answer. Nothing. The gut punch hits. His fighting style is Kaguya-s at all. It's him, and fear claws up her chest. She pleads for him to pull back. With the standoff grinding on, a brand new fighter drops in. Sieg Sylphid's KOG slams down from the sky right between the two machines, and he gives the Resistance pilot one brutal ultimatum. Back down or he'll crush him by force. Far from the battlefield, Kinyas grips his controls, and anguish twists his face into something unbearable. He gets Reina's logic. He knows killing the princess will unleash brutal annihilation on the Resistance and his own people, but still he can't break away. So sorry, Reina. His resolve hardens like iron. His resolve was ironclad. He was going to kill that target, no matter the cost. Down below, Reina could only stare as her KOG sat there, helpless, while his focus stayed welded to the mission. He knew he couldn't stop himself, not even with Reina in front of him. He'd clear her out of his way, even if it meant wrecking her machine, and right as he reached for the move, Sieg's attacks crashed down like a storm, shoving him onto full defense. In a secure command center, Lord Asgard finally clocked the real target, his own sister, Anu, whose talent somehow always puts a target on her back. Anu said civilian evacuations were almost done, and Sie barked at him to move to the next area. Sieg snapped for a situation report, and Lord Asgard said the attacker had struck, knocked Jillian down, and that he and Reina had barely gotten out, though their KOG was now disabled, so he demanded an immediate retrieval. Riene snapped that she and her sister had just run into the red KOG Siegs, and the moment he said he and Lord Asgard would handle it themselves, his confidence hardened like steel. He then told Riene her machine was too busted to move, waved off a retrieval squad as a waste, and figured any attempt to come for her would only set her off more. Sieg pushed toward the spot and stumbled on 2 KOGs sitting in the clearing. One was wrecked so badly Sieg could barely process it, because he'd never seen the princess's unit broken down like this. When they reached the wrecked machine, Lord Asgard leaned in and shouted to its pilot, Anu, demanding to know if she was okay. Anu burst into the scene, practically glowing with relief the moment Lord Asgard showed up, while Reina, still there too, let out a breath because her friend was safe. But Anu's rage flared anyway, blaming herself for getting caught off guard and snapping that she needed a fresh KOG right now, swearing as the princess that she'd make every attacker regret it with a fate worse than death. Reina tried to talk her down, yet Anu wouldn't back off, telling her to step aside and trust them if things went south. Rage boils in her chest as she gnaws her thumb in fury, cursing the opponent for outplaying her, then it hits her hard. If Riene hadn't shown up, she would have been finished. Sieg watches, stunned, like he can't believe how intense she's getting. Reyna's safety is what's on her mind, because Sieg is shouting her name in full panic, and she coldly shuts him down, insisting that against that specific enemy, Reyna won't survive with all her pieces intact. Before the panic can snowball, Lord Asgard calmly slaps the moment into silence and tells Sieg to calm down, promising him there's zero reason to worry about Rene, leaving Sieg completely stunned and baffled. Even that isn't the whole mess. Lord Asgard's new target snaps around and demands what he really meant by his words, and Lord Asgard just grins, saying it's all unfolding exactly like he pictured. His words linger in the air, then, out of nowhere, Reyna gets blasted by a vicious hit from an unseen source. The impact hurls her back, and Anu can only gape in stunned disbelief. A brutal shockwave blasts backward through the air, flipping everything in its path, and she screams at Lord Asgard, furious, demanding to know what this betrayal means and why it's happening. He stands there stone calm, pistol in hand, and delivers a cold explanation for everyone to swallow. Princess Emir, he says, tragically fell while fighting the resistance, and the whole lie hangs in the air as Sieg yells his name in total disbelief. She's sprawled on the ground when a new one lifts her head, her brain screaming through the betrayal, and all she can do is blurt, "What are you saying?" because she can't even wrap her mind around how fast everything flipped. Her shock hit like a punch, but Lord Asgard just met it with a calm, almost gentle smile, confirming what she feared was real, telling her this was exactly how it looked and pushing, "Tell me, don't you understand?" She stared back, eyes bulging with disbelief, and stammered the question that hung in the air: why was he about to kill her? He shot back with a chilling, smug grin, and asked if the answer wasn't painfully obvious. His face turned stone cold as he stayed locked on the fallen Rene with his pistol, spitting out the truth again. He'd always hated her, a disgusting wretch who saw everyone else as nothing but pigs. With the truth finally landing, Sieg spun toward Anu and blurted an apology for dragging her into all this. Then he shook his head, telling her not to fret, because he'd already made up his mind to follow her. She admitted his power loud and clear. Right now, nobody in the Empire can stop him, and then she hit back with her own vow. As long as he's alive, blood keeps spilling, and she's done watching the cycle drag on. Rage twisted Siegs's face at what his brother did, then Lord Asgard calmly shut him down, saying it was his duty as a brother to be the one who ends him personally. That declaration snapped everything. She raged with a furious roar, lunged straight at Lord Asgard, and screamed for him not to mess with her, just as he jerked his pistol up in shock. Lord Asgard just shuts her down, cold, sharp, and demanding to know who she thinks she is, while her rage rages out of her eyes, and she shrieks back that the body count she's left behind is nothing next to his. As she screams, memories slam into her, starting the day she was born, when the royal family's plans locked around her and the throne's eyes never blinked. They commanded her to conquer the world, and even her own blood refused to help. These memories slam into her so hard she drops to her knees, screaming that it isn't her fault. She'd only ever acted as the princess, doing everything for the Empire, and yet her fingers claw into the dirt as she begs the impossible. Why were they forcing her to conquer and slaughter so recklessly? She staggers away from Lord Asgard, blood pouring from her torn hand, and she flat out refuses to take the blame, saying the Emperor and even the world shoved her onto this path. Peace was never waiting for her, she snaps. It was always one choice, kill or get killed. Her desperate plea jolted Lord Asgard's mind, and suddenly he was back on another princess, Emir Asgard, remembering the time Sieg stood before her, delivering terrifying news that left her staring in disbelief, shaking with shock. All she could do was insist it couldn't be true. The memory locks in his resolve. He lifts his pistol, points the barrel ahead, and steels himself, thinking about how his own life could get snuffed out by the tiny little brother he once trusted. Then his mind whips back to the day he first met Emir. There he is, younger than he's ever been, standing in front of her as she smiles and introduces herself with her hand held out, telling him she's finally getting a little brother. She flashed a warm smile, eyes shut with real joy, then nudged him to get along with her, calling him sweetly Lord Chance, like he was hers to protect. A sharp crack snaps through the air, right on the ground, making the new one flinch as tears from her earlier breakdown streak down her face. She jerks up from the ground, gasping, and there, Lord Asgard looms over her with her pistol gripped in his hand, while right beside him, Sieg Sylphid casually calls out like, "So what exactly are you missing?" Sieg snaps his focus to his brother, slumped over with heavy, ragged breaths, then he flicks a dismissive gesture and needles him, asking if he honestly thinks he'll reach his goals like this. Lord Asgard shakes with fury and yells for him to shut up. He lifts his head and his face hardens into pure, grim resolve, like he's already decided there's no backing out. Sieg clocks the change fast, realizing his brother's mind is made. Then a voice snaps the truth into place, sealing this new determination. Watch him clamp onto his brother's arm and flash that wide, mocking grin, like he's daring Asgard to prove he can actually pull this off. while Anu, sprawled on the ground, clocks the truth instantly. This cruel give and take is just how they've always been. His laughter fades and a knowing smile slips onto Sieg's face. Then he leans in and tells Lord Asgard not to be so gentle, like he exists for nothing else but moments exactly like this. Asgard nods in quiet agreement, yet Sieg can't shake the feeling that something still isn't right. As his resolve hardens, a memory of his sister Ymir crashes into him. She grins with unsettling fire, eyes stretched wide, and tells him, "With those eyes, you look just like father." Her words lock his choice in place. His finger clenches on the trigger as he whispers his final goodbye in silence. A deafening crack tore through the night as the weapon fired, white-hot light exploding into the darkness, and in the chaos, only one name got screamed out: no. Up in the ruined city's skies, two knights of steel gear warfare collide. Kenya Mitsuruga's unit snaps into action, parrying Riene Sylphid's machine with razor-precise moves and blasting the strike aside with pure, crushing force. Riene's KOG gets slammed downward by the impact, smashing into the ground with a violent blast of dust and wreckage, while a bone-chilling scream tears through the air at the impact site. Inside her cockpit, she can't stop trembling, then it hits her hard. This isn't a simulator anymore, it's the real fight, no mercy, just force. The sheer power that just slammed into her makes her wonder how much Kenya has been holding back all this time. Meanwhile, from his own cockpit, he watches Riene press harder and harder. Then he smirks because he knows his plan worked. Her sword and flight are shut down. Before he can savor it, the comms crackle with Akagami Ishin's voice. Kenya's stunned he's still talking, and the second he looks, his eyes land on Riene's dead KOG, proof that he really is that capable. On the ground, Ishin stands beside Kaguya and the other operatives, snapping into action as they confirm, over comms, that every civilian has been evacuated. Then he turns back to the voice on the other end and asks, "Are you okay?" He tells Kenya it all happened because of his distraction. While Kaguya watches with tight worry in her eyes, Ishin quickly soothes her, reminding her she was worried too, since the only ones still left in that area are their group. Cog's busted and broken again, so Kenya gets the snap to hurry back. He nods, promises he'll return in a flash, then spots Riene's KOG half-swallowed by rubble and can't help but mouth a silent apology, knowing they're not done yet. Riene rips into the cockpit's damage, but all she can do is stare as Kenya's machine rockets upward and vanishes into the sky. She shouts, begging him to stop. She leans out of her cockpit, voice cracking with desperation as she screams his name. As the KOG disappears down the road, it rips the last shred of hope out of her. Slumped in her seat, she feels it hit. She can't reach him, and just like that, everything between them is done. Meanwhile, Kenya's machine drops into a rendezvous point inside a shattered sector, and it hooks up with Akagami Ishin, Kaguya, and the rest of their assembled forces. He stumbles off the ship, rubbing the back of his neck like he can't believe it's real, wondering if he's really back. Then Akagami Ishin steps in with a grin, roaring welcome like the mission never ended. Right before he can even take in his surroundings, Kaguya barrels forward and smashes into him with a sudden, hard embrace. She clamps onto him like letting go is impossible, and the sheer relief hits her voice as she blurts out how terrified she'd been. Kenya's stunned, then snaps that she's an idiot, even as he quietly admits he'd do it all over again because giving his all paid off. Right when it gets too real, Akagami Ishin clears his throat, cuts the moment short. He throws out a quick apology for interrupting their reunion, then snaps back to reality. They've got business to handle. Kaguya jolts him with a shove, cheeks blazing, and blurts out that she was only checking whether he'd been hurt. Then she yells for him to get away, leaving Kenya completely stunned by how fast her mood flips. Inside the old underground railroad, the resistance finally gets the good news. The civilian evacuation hit its mark, and nobody got left behind. Akagami Ishin even calls out that the Empire probably won't chase them this far, while Kenya's fighting on the battlefield goes just as well. Even with the good news, Kenya drops his gaze to his hand and worry twists in his chest. Reina's safety haunts him, and the guilt of failing his mission crushes him, since he was one step away from defeating the princess. He murmurs an apology, quietly and broken-hearted. Akagami Ishin catches what he's saying and flips the whole view. He notices the Empire has gone strangely quiet, and he's convinced Kenya's push was strong enough to throw their momentum off course. Seizing this opening, Kaguya snaps her focus onto Kenya and pushes the plan hard. Get everyone off the battlefield, now, before they lose their last shot. Just as everything is lining up, a resistance fighter rockets into their command vehicle, screaming that something's wrong, then slams the worst news on them as he points to a screen where a broadcast has just started. On screen, Lord Asgard locks eyes with the resistance and tells them straight up, the Empire promised to spare lives and to show mercy to anyone who lays down their weapons. Rage and grief crash into his voice as he drops a shocking announcement. Princess Ymir, their mistress, has been slain in battle. The broadcast keeps rolling over the Resistance's frozen, stunned faces as Lord Asgard roars that anyone who kills Imperial nobility should be put to death 1,000 times over. Then he strips them of every right, and under his command, the Empire moves in to wipe the Resistance out completely. He stumbled back from the broadcast, hands snapping to his mouth in pure disbelief, because the princess was dead. His thoughts spun out of control. He knew she'd been killed, but what came next still didn't make sense. In the root he swore he knew the princess wasn't supposed to show up yet, so when fate twisted, panic hit hard. Then a Resistance operative rushed in and told Akagami Ishin that their recon team finally made contact with her. The truth didn't come from some announcement. It hit like a nightmare in the sky, because a huge pack of KOG units was already barreling straight for their location. He demanded the exact number, and when they told him, dread hit hard, at least 30 in the first wave. With his fists tight, he finally felt it, the moment fate had been waiting to flip the whole story. With his resolve forged steel hard, he turned his back on Akagami Ishin, no backing out now. He straightened up and declared, "I'll draw the enemy forces away myself." Kaguya and her father were left speechless by his words. Kaguya snapped back, swearing it couldn't be true and demanding to know what he meant. He turned to them, face hard with resolve, and declared that he'd buy them time to escape. She spun toward her father, begging him to step in, and reminded him he'd seen Kenya break like this before, because even if he was strong, this time was different. Her plea hit silence as she locked eyes with Kenya, and pure dread swept across her face, because she knew that look in his eyes. She caught the look in his eyes as he stood beside her battered brother, Jean, eyes of a man who'd already decided, eyes burning with an unbreakable outcome. That hit her like a punch. Tears spilled instantly. She rushed to apologize to Kenya, blaming her own weakness for his pain, and then demanded to know why he was the only one who had to live through a fate like that. He softly wiped the tear off her cheek and told her she didn't need to apologize, swearing he was just glad he could fight for everyone, and especially for her. But even as she kept crying, she finally blurted out that she couldn't wrap her head around why he would do it. Turning away from her, he stared down her father, Akagami Ishin. Kenya said he needed to make the choice again and demanded permission to go, and Ishin answered with a grim, hard nod. He straight up recognized Kenya's grit, even if it looked pathetic, because there was no other option. They had to lean on him. Ishin shoved a pistol into the young man's hands and demanded one promise. Whatever goes down, he cannot throw his life away. Kenya froze in surprise, then Ishin hit him with the truth. He'd once said he had nobody to call family, but that's changed. We're family now. Kenya's smile snapped wide open as he nodded, agreeing without hesitation. As Kenya got ready to walk out, Jean stared at his back and relived the helplessness he once felt, then remembered the promise that pushed him to become stronger. Right beside him, Kaguya's chest tightened with the same powerlessness, cursing that once again she couldn't do a damn thing. Even with her heart aching, Kenya forced herself to follow through, at least one last look, one final check over his shoulder. She stepped back from her new family, lifted her hand in a final goodbye, and watched as he marched off toward the battlefield alone. He didn't even get a few steps in before Kaguya's voice sliced through the air, shouting his name, and he whipped around. There she was, striding toward him with a face set in iron resolve, because she had to tell him how she felt, and she already knew she'd regret it if she didn't. Before he could even blink, she swept in and kissed his cheek, and Kenya froze, eyes bulging with pure disbelief as his mind spun into a total daze. He froze in place, his hand hovering over his cheek, totally flustered. Kaguya's cheeks burned as she blurted out that she felt she could never repay all the help he'd given her. This, she said, was the only thing she could think to offer. Then she tossed in, shaky but bold, that he could treat it like an advance if he wanted the real thing. Tears pouring down her face, Akagami Kaguya grabs Kenya with a desperate plea. She begs him to promise he'll return to her no matter what, and when he glances back, he quietly tells her, "Please." Other words spread a wide, confident grin across his face as he declares that reward like it's already his. He'll crawl back even from death itself. He throws up a thumbs up and locks it in as a vow. Kaguya is still crying, but she wipes away a tear and nods, only asking one thing, that he promises to wait for her. Operation kicks off on a jam-packed highway. The KOG units shove into traffic, and their first mission is to carve out a clean escape route, with Kenya stepping up to lead the charge. In the command center, Akagami Ishin snaps a harsh order to his daughter. He demands every other KOG squad hunker down, support, and seal Kenya's flanks. Then he warns Kaguya, face to face, not to step in front of him because she'll only slow him down. She just nods quietly, saying she gets it. The ground units get the plan spelled out, and the second Kenya clears a path, the squads peel off and hit multiple routes. While they split, Kenya's unit becomes the decoy, dragging any chasing enemies right to them. And when the order comes through, Kenya fires back a loud, furious yes. Inside his cockpit, Kenya's face locks into pure determination, his eyes narrowing as he silently swears, "I'll carve a way through." Meanwhile, in a separate command room, Sieg Sylphid barks an order to send a squad to Point E. He wants 30 units to surround the targets and slam the door on any escape route. Lord starts grilling him, asking if that many is really needed, and Sieg snaps back, "You can't ever be too careful." Lord Asgard keeps staring at a monitor only he can see, chin propped on his hand, eyes blazing with curiosity as he murmurs, "Now, show me." From his command unit, he watched a swarm of drones choke the sky over the wrecked city, and then he sent out a silent dare, hungry to see just how far his opponent's power could really go. With the odds stacked so high they felt impossible, Kenya slammed forward alone, just one machine daring the enemy. The pilot stared, stunned that he'd even try it, then blasted him with a storm of fire, rounds tearing apart the air around his KOG, but Kenya didn't stop. He barreled through the wreckage anyway. The instant surprise hit them, his focus snapped tight on one mission: cut down as many KOGs as fast as he could, blade screaming through the air, carving through 3 enemies in one brutal pass. The first hit didn't stop the whole force. Before he could breathe, the KOG squad's attachments peeled off and tore past him straight toward the getaway transports. He snapped with rage, realizing he couldn't shake them off or make them all turn their attention away. Doubled down, he drove himself to move smarter and cut down as many KOGs as he could. From a fleeing truck, Akagami Ishin watched the desperate clash, shouting at Kenya to remember what it feels like to fight at the brink, where one wrong move gets you killed, and just like that, Kenya's blade snapped true again. The enemy flipped tactics and stopped trading blows, then rained down a brutal volley of missiles from far away, and one pilot mocked him, jeering, "So tell me, how are you getting out of this while your resistance is just going nowhere?" What? Kaguya watched in terror, screaming that they had to bring the missiles down, while Kenya blasted his machine's weapons nonstop, snatching down a few, until the whole swarm swallowed the sky, and he could only curse as his explosions lit up the heavens, knowing he couldn't stop them all. As Akagami Ishin watched, Kenya tried to line up one last shot, but his weapon choked with a hollow click. Then a KOG on the other side unleashed a brutal heavy shell, slamming into his machine dead center and detonating a deafening blast. Kaguya's machine gets swallowed by a colossal explosion, the shockwave blasting the nearby transport vehicle like it's made of paper. From her own command center, Kaguya's eyes snap wide with pure horror as she watches it all go up. But he slams through the smoke and flames, still trading blows. Then he rips into the comms, yelling at the transport to keep rolling, because nobody's stopping for him as he keeps shredding the swarm of enemy units. He barrels through their formation, refusing to let even one slip past, and with a ferocious scream he dares them to charge, until one of the enemy pilots is left staring, stunned by this determined warrior who clearly isn't here to play along. From far away, Jillian Shikimanohi watches and says, "This isn't a game, this is the real battlefield." He admits Kenya's spirit and skill are flawless, but war itself hits nothing like a simulation. To prove his point, the battlefield goes wild, chaos spilling everywhere. A blazing beam of energy slams out of the sky and tears into the city street with brutal force. Kenya jerks her head up, completely blindsided. Right when his guard drops for a heartbeat, an enemy KOG darts in and drives a gigantic, lance-like weapon straight through his unit's torso. The impact hits him like a punch to the face. He can't even process it. From his lookout, Jillian's voice shatters with horror as she screams his name, and up above the wrecked machine, the enemy pilot looms and vows he'll avenge the princess. Back at the command center, Akagami draws in a grim breath and snaps that Kenya isn't coming back anytime soon. Then Kaguya, beside him, screams into the comms, begging Kenya to answer, but all she gets is dead silence as her voice shatters into a desperate, broken scream of his name. The aerial duel between the two KOGs crashes into pure chaos. One machine rockets into a freefall through the sky. In his battered cockpit, a bloodied sea sylphy still grins as he spits, "There's no way I can lose," calling himself the war god. Across the way, Kenya Metsurugi can only stare in stunned silence as KOG rockets forward, its blade screaming through the air in a massive arc, and the hit lands dead on, slashing Kenya's unit with a blazing flash that lights up the whole battlefield. From his battered cockpit, Sieg can only watch and swear he's taking victory, no matter what. The enemy machine detonates and Kenya lunges into a scream, Kaguya's name tearing out of him as he refuses to believe it's over, right as his own KOG gets swallowed by a second blast, ripping its arm clean off and spraying it all in a vicious storm of sparks and shrapnel. In the middle of the battle, Lord Asgard gets a report in the command center and says, cool as ice, that he knew it would end like this. His subordinate confirms they've lost contact with both Jillian and the enemy unit, and then bluntly admits they must have blown each other out of the sky. He weighs the new info and can't help but admire it. One pilot holding out against so many resistance fighters is wild. Then, with a sharp, decisive voice, he barks an order, find me the pilot of the down KOG. While they're down there on the ground, Sieg Sylphid leans in with one of his men and asks, "Do you think that pilot's still alive?" Up in the sky, the deployment craft roar into motion, and Sieg snaps that he'll personally hunt the pilot down for murdering the princess, then orders his troops to bring him back alive. The soldiers salute, then surge out to carry it out. A heavy smoke cloud spirals up from the far-off wreckage, and an unseen officer snaps, asking how much chance their target really has, because he'd rather take his own life than get caught. Another voice answers on the spot, cold and final. No, that certainty, it just comes from one brutal truth: the pilot still hasn't pulled off his mission. In the shattered city ruins, the wrecked KOG sits dead still, silent proof of the fight and the unfinished purpose of the man inside. He lurches through the wreckage, his pursuers' orders roaring in his ears as they demand the area get combed clean. No way he got far, while tiny insect-like drones skitter over the ground, sweeping every inch. Winces as his cut burns his face, because the pursuers are already right on his tail, and he knows he only lived through that crash thanks to the sturdy KOG, but at this pace, capture and death are coming no matter what. His survival instincts hit like a hammer. Ice crawls down his spine as he feels someone lock onto his back, and the worst part, it feels exactly like the murderous pressure Reina unleashed during training. If he hadn't caught that pulse of danger, he wouldn't be alive. He tilts his head up and spots a whole squadron of flying KOG units streaking toward where his allies escaped, because they're not done hunting yet. He debates whether to bolt and save himself, then shuts that idea down because he remembers a promise: no matter what, never give up on life. Fresh determination hits him hard, and he decides he has to grab a KOG and fight for time so the others can escape. Meanwhile, a heavy door grinds open and Reina Sylphid stumbles into the command room, drained to the bone. Sieg and Lord Asgard snap their heads toward her as one of Asgard's men praises her effort, then Sieg cuts in and calls her name right away. He demands to know if she's okay, and when she says yes, he blurts out an apology, saying he just had to be sure, then turns stern and asks why she went charging into the front lines. Lord Asgard shuts him down, telling them to stop, and flat out saying it looks like she had her reasons. His subordinate, totally lost, blurts out what he even means, and Lord Asgard leans in close, murmuring reassurance, then tells her to rest because he already knows everything from what's happening around the princess to every other detail, until his sentence gets cut off when she yells again. Something's flashing on the monitor. She's subordinate to the operator, and from her console she reports what she found. She's picked up a KOG from an unknown faction, and here's the wild part: it's broadcasting a call sign stolen straight from their own army. She adds that the unidentified unit is already barreling toward them at mind-blowing speed, and the news snaps everyone's attention, while Lord Asgard and Reina Sylphid lock in with grim, unblinking focus. Meanwhile, inside a wrecked, debris-choked building, the KOG squad hunts Kenya but keeps hitting dead ends, because once they lose him, they're sure he slipped down to a lower floor where their huge machines can't reach. From his hiding spot, Kenya holds his breath as one pilot breaks away and hops off to investigate on foot, ordering the others to stay on watch, because that's his opening. He clamps his pistol in his hand, jaws set, eyes locked, then forces himself to breathe, to zoom past the fear, because this is something he has to do. Right when Kenya is about to move, a voice snaps through his earpiece, calling his name, and he freezes, startled, because it's Tech Chief Tanaka, sounding insanely relieved that he finally got through. Through the open channel, Tanaka blurts out, "How are you getting on this line?" even as he admits this is the worst moment to talk, while the other pilots keep watch, totally clueless. Kenya creeps forward, trying to cut the call and saying he's busy, but Tanaka just bursts into laughter, tells him to stay on, and drops the bomb that he has a gift meant to help Kenya with what he's dealing with right now. So Kenya fires back, questioning why that gift couldn't wait. From his remote hideout, Tech Chief Tanaka grins as the praise hits. He's thrilled, like he's finally struck gold, and he's not about to let that rare talent slip away. He tells Kenya he loves the way he speaks his mind, but says the real details will have to wait. He confirms he's got Kenya's location, says his gift is headed through the shortest route, and snaps a warning to watch his head. Before Kenya can even blink, the ground right in front of him erupts upward in a brutal blast of rock and debris. The blast slams him backward, and he screams as rubble pelts down around him. As the dust finally settles, he scrambles back onto his feet. Tanaka barks that he needs to guard his masterpiece, custom-made for him. Then a colossal, armored hand claws its way out of the crater, and Kenya's staring just turns pure, total confusion. Up from the earth surges a whole KOG unit, its metallic frame flashing like a beacon. Kenya locks onto it instantly and blurts its name in pure shock: Tajima Kazuchi. Tanaka leans in, and the machine's glowing optical sensors flare as he asks if he can keep fighting now that he's got this. Now locked into the cockpit seat, he clamps his hands on the controls and suddenly feels unstoppable. He swears this machine will make his job a breeze. Through the comms, Tanaka chimes in with pure satisfaction, saying that's exactly the answer he'd been praying to hear. Tanaka flashes a confident smirk, snaps his glasses into place, and barks the final order: go out there and beat them into the ground. On the battlefield, two Asgardian KOGs loom over the crater blasted by the new machine, barking demands at the unidentified unit for its name and affiliation. Then, before they can react, the Tajima Kazuchi snaps out of sight in a blur of lightning, leaving the soldiers staring, clueless, wondering where it went. It's back in the blink of an eye, blade already tearing through the air. The pilot of the unit at target snaps into panic, yelling that the unknown KOG showed up out of nowhere while they were hunting the enemy, and then he watches its speed, because down on the ground they're totally outmatched. Tajima Kazuchi's blade rips clean through the Asgardian machine's torso, sparks and scrap blasting everywhere. Then, right as the unit erupts, a command snaps out: hold the artillery and fire because the target is about to move fast. The machine is way too fast, whipping in a sharp pivot and lunging out to slice down another enemy unit, while a soldier's final desperate cry breaks the air. In the blink of an eye, the fight is done. Tajima Kazuchi stands frozen in the smoke and smolder of the wreckage, twin blades poised and ready. From the command center, Sieg sprinted up the stairs, stunned by the fresh KOG unit rolling out, and right beside him Lord Asgard burst into laughter, leaving Sieg completely baffled. Mrs. Sieg fixes him with a questioning stare, and a confident smirk tugs at his lips as he realizes the tech chief has finally swung into action. Sieg's still stunned because the same pilot is flying both the Ikes and this new prototype, and the realization hits hard. He can't believe anyone could maneuver it that cleanly, and his mind locks onto one answer as Lord Asgard asks if the pilot can really turn the tide. Then Kenya Mitsurugi's steely, determined face flashes on screen and Sieg's thoughts go into overdrive. On the battlefield, his lone unit stands against the sky, while an overwhelming swarm of enemy drones closes in from every direction. Clamps his hands on the controls, jaw tightening as his face hardens, because with numbers stacked against him, he can't afford to hesitate. He cuts into the comms and tells the tech chief he's ready to unleash a special system. Kenya fires back with a warning that this choice will crush him harder than anything before, and without even a beat, he confirms he'll go through with it. It screams the order to dump the OB drive, and the KOG immediately explodes with raw power, its body reshaping as the overboosted inverse drive kicks in. Transformation locks in, every system snaps into place, fully primed for the next wave of chaos. He blasted his power in a blinding surge, an energy storm ripped straight through the battlefield. Then the Asgardian artillery squad unleashed their coordinated barrage, hammering his transformed KOG until their shots converged, blam, into a massive explosion right in the middle of their formation. The assault fizzled into nothing, then his unit burst out of the smoke and flames completely unhurt. The enemy pilots stared in total disbelief, yelling for their crews to keep blasting, but they couldn't wrap their heads around how their shots just wouldn't land. Ignoring their pathetic attempts, he snapped back, energy surged from his KOG in a lightning-splitting blast, cutting through every enemy unit at once and detonating the whole squadron in a storm of explosions. A blinding burst of light ripped through his unit's optical sensors, and below, the last Asgardian pilots were left frozen in terror, trying to make sense of what they'd just seen, because the whole Imperial Guard, all 100 units, had been wiped out. Hovered alone over the wreckage-strewn sky, a silent monument to the fact that he pulled off that impossible feat by himself. I swear, Lord Asgard spun toward Sieg Sylphid and said it was done, over. Sieg, beads of sweat forming, could barely get out that he couldn't believe it was finished just like that. Lord Asgard admitted it hadn't gone the way they planned, but there was no reason to keep pushing. Right there, Renee Sylphid watched them, her face locked in shock mixed with real worry. Before them stretched the bleak aftermath of war, a battlefield choked with smoldering wreckage where KOG units were wiped out. For Renee, it didn't just hurt, it gutted her because she finally understood. Those blasted remains were her sister's squad, killed and dumped there for one reason only, because they followed Renee. Lord Asgard cut through the silence with a smug grin, bragging that the resistance was annihilated as payback for the princess's murder, and that he'd handled every last dissenter himself, no exceptions. Then, like it was nothing, he tossed out, "Isn't that a brilliant plan?" and left Reyna completely stunned. Meanwhile, deep in the cockpit of the victorious machine, the pilot stared at his own hand, and instant relief hit like a wave. He'd nailed every objective. His quiet triumph instantly hit a wall of cold fury from Sieg, eyes narrowing, fist clenching, as he realized this moment snapped the final piece of the bigger puzzle into place. Reyna tried to tune out Sieg's simmering rage, but Lord Asgard turned to her anyway, telling her it would be faster if she tagged along and joined them. Then Sieg snapped in agreement, saying it was time to go, and just like that Reina was left staring at them, desperate to understand what was really happening. As they geared up to leave, the KOG just stood there, silent on the battlefield, with its twin blades hanging at its sides, like a grim trophy of everything that got shattered today. The pilot hit his breaking point, then the cockpit swung open and Tech Chief Tanaka yanked Kenya out of there, saying the enemy was pulling back and firing off a big congratulations for his win. He slumped against the cockpit's edge, battered and drained, then started thanking the Tech Chief nonstop, swearing he only won because of him, while Tanaka just waved it off, saying he'd only done what he wanted to do. As the battle adrenaline finally drained out of him, his vision swam and he nearly collapsed. Then Tech Chief Tanaka strolled in, asked what he'd do next, and reminded him his identity was already out there. Tanaka went on to say that if he tried returning, they'd kill him, so with no place left to hide, the only move might be to defect to the Takeoka Federation. The Tech Chief pushed his glasses up and stared, deep in thought, then admitted, no way he could have seen it, how a kid actually beat the undefeated prince, Lord Asgard. As his vision crumbled to black, Kinya's final breath swore to Kaguya that he'd be back soon, because he'd cleared the losing event and made it out alive. Across the empire, a breaking news broadcast slammed onto every screen. Mitsurugi Kenya, just 17 and a resistance kid from Amaterasu, had been executed. They branded him as the prime suspect in the capital crime, killing the princess and the reason behind the brutal fighting that tore through the slums. The spark for this declaration was the death of Princess Emir, when her assassination rocked the entire empire and lit the fuse for the chaos that followed. After his sister's death, everyone's gaze snapped straight to Lord Asgard, the one person nobody cared about before. Then, just like that, the whole battle over who would inherit and who would rule started to shift. Meanwhile, the Amaterasu crew had escaped the country on a freighter, and now they huddled and watched the broadcast, because their next move was terrifying, teaming up with an enemy alliance. When Kaguya saw the news about Kenya's fate, she crumpled, tears of grief and rage pouring down her face. With her father Ishin holding her tight, it was obvious, something new and vengeful had just ignited inside the resistance. A few days later, a fist pounds on a door, echoing down a bright sunlit corridor, and a young man with razor-sharp silver hair strides with pure purpose, draped in an ornate Asgardian uniform. He pauses and fixes the tall collar of his fresh outfit, then boom, Lord Asgard steps in, eyes scanning him with pure satisfaction. He grins and says the silver hair looks made for him, because now everyone would mistake him for a real, true guardian. The prince pushes on, pitching a fresh name for what's coming next, Sword Sylphid. The young man, face hidden behind a dark mask, stares ahead as his new identity locks in for good.